Chapter 491. In the depths of the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, in a place where no sunlight could be seen since ancient times, an exquisite palace was emitting a faint glow. A very thin cloud was shackled by a very powerful Dharma power, measuring 100 miles in length and 100 miles in width. Numerous palaces and pavilions stood loftily on the cloud. On each of the four corners of the cloud were four strangely shaped pagodas, exquisite and emanating an eerie evil aura. This cloud was no more than 100 miles wide, and the tall, thin tower was also over 100 miles tall. The base of the tower was only about 100 feet in circumference, and from a distance, it looked like four thin needles. The pagodas were built from bone bricks that measured 4 feet and 9 inches in width after being carefully polished using the bones of some unknown beast. There were no patterns on their smooth surfaces, only the natural patterns of the bones. The four pagodas were shrouded in a very strong evil aura. Their surfaces were shrouded in phosphorescent flames, and four large blood-red lotus-shaped basins were erected on top of their spires. They were filled with a sticky, blood-red liquid, and a flame that stood several tens of feet tall was burning ragingly. The blood-red gleam that sprayed out from the basins looked very creepy in the pitch-black abyss, sending forth a chill that made one feel uneasy. The exquisite and luxurious palaces and pavilions were extremely luxurious, but all the buildings, flower beds, gardens, and many other things were shrouded in green phosphorescent flames and blood-red fiend flames. There were no pedestrians in the surroundings. Men and women clad in long black robes, their faces deathly pale like masks, were standing quietly at the corners of the palaces and pavilions. They looked like puppets made from human skin, which added a sense of death to the palaces. When one took a closer look, one would find that there was a pitch-black cave entrance about 100 miles in diameter under the thin cloud, about 100 miles deep. The cave entrance was roughly round in shape, from which black mist kept billowing out. Every now and then, a few clusters of green and red mist would flash across the cave entrance. Vaguely, one could see a fiend god with a translucent body, dressed in strange outfits, sitting cross-legged on red lotus thrones with a solemn expression on his face. He was hovering amidst the black mist with a long banner in his hand, vaguely forming a strange formation. This palace was none other than Miaoing Palace. This cave entrance was the land of 9 negate yang under the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean. As of now, Patriarch Miaoing Palace had built a temporary palace in the land of 9 negate yang, and for over 10,000 years, she had been hiding alone in the unfathomably mysterious and dangerous land of 9 negate yang, refining the mystic treasures of the Fiend League with the help of the evil and vicious energy contained in it. The only entrance leading to the land of 9 negate yang was concealed by his unique formation, the minor Rakshasa void reversal and heart-killing formation. Even with the joint forces of a dozen cultivators who possessed the same cultivation base as Patriarch Miaoing Palace, it was still difficult for them to break through the formation in a short period of time. Inside Miaoing Palace, Goddess Miao Xian was holding a brush in her hand, painting on a sheet of snow-white leather. It did not look like the residence of a cultivator, but was more like a brothel in the mortal world. The leather was peeled off from the body of a young girl from the Longbow Kingdom, and was tanned with the melted snow from 10,000 years of Xian Bing essence, as well as 18 other spirit herbs. It was thin, smooth, and could hold the ink well. It was the best painting material in the world of cultivators that Goddess Miao Xian had discovered. Only the prettiest girls from the Longbow Kingdom could have such a leather, measuring several tens of feet in both width and length. If it was a human girl, perhaps the leather would be more detailed, but it would not be as large. A set of 36 brushes of different lengths and thicknesses was made from the hair of 108 teenage girls from the human race, the Longbow Kingdom, the Feather Men, the Double-Faced Man, and a few other young girls from different races. Each brush was personally crafted by a gold immortal crafting master from the Ministry of Works of the Celestial Court. Both the craftsmanship and the quality of the finished product were impeccable. The pigments used were natural pigments of the best quality. Among them were the crimson blood essence extracted from the hearts of the bravest human warriors, the green and blue bone marrow extracted from the bodies of aquatic demons, and the natural pigments extracted from the bodies of various immortal birds and rare beasts. The entire set of painting tools was exquisite and precious. Even with goddess Miao Xian's power and status in Miaoying Palace, it took her several thousand years to collect all of them. After all, it was not difficult for Miaoying Palace to select over 100 flawless, pure, and beautiful girls, and use the materials from their bodies to make a set of brushes. She also needed to collect so many natural pigments to paint with. Therefore, every time goddess Miao Xian painted, she would be very careful, fearing that she would waste even a tiny bit of the rare materials. Goddess Miao Xian stood naked beside a long table, holding the finest brush in her hand as she carefully traced the eyebrows of a beautiful girl on the painting scroll. Every single strand, every single eyebrow was drawn with the utmost caution, and every curve was drawn with the utmost precision, fearing that the slightest carelessness would destroy this enormous painting scroll that she had been working on for over 1 month. Goddess Miao Xian stood less than 6 feet tall, and her waist measured over 3 feet and 2 inches. Her skin was dark, and the texture was similar to the skin of an old hippo. Despite her plump body, she had a 1-foot-long donkey face, a pair of beady eyes, a flat nose, and a large mouth that hung low and heavy like 2 bananas. There was a distance of at least half a foot between her mouth and the bridge of her nose, but she had a long tongue that could easily lick the bridge of her nose. When she was engrossed in painting, goddess Miao Xian liked to stick out her tongue and lick her lips. Therefore, her lips were always wet, and drool kept dripping down from the corners of her mouth. She was always followed by 2 of her most trusted serving ladies, who would take out handkerchiefs and wipe the drool off her lips from time to time, fearing that the drool would stain the painting scroll that she had been working hard on for over 1 month. Despite her appearance, goddess Miao Xian's favorite paintings were painting of rich and noble peony, painting of drunk crabapple blossoms, and some other similar themes. On top of that, she always tried her best to paint the girls in the paintings perfectly, without a single flaw. Once, the patriarch of Miaoying Palace had praised goddess Miao Xian's paintings, saying that her paintings had sentience and souls. If an almighty expert were to cast a little trick on goddess Miao Xian's painting, the person in it would be able to come to life and become a real human being. He. Goddess Miao Xian burst out laughing. Finally, she put away her brush, tilted her head sideways, and began to study the painting scroll that she had spent 1 month of hard work on. It was beautiful and wonderful. In the painting, a young girl was lying timidly on a soft bed under a blossoms of crabapple blossoms. She was so beautiful, so gentle, and so pure. A masterpiece, a supreme masterpiece. Clapping her hands, goddess Miao Xian roared, "Lu Buwei, get your ass out here right now." A plume of dark smoke rolled up from the ground, as 5 little ghosts walked out from it, escorting Lu Buwei. The little ghosts uttered a few cries, then transformed into whirlwinds and vanished into thin air. With a calm expression on his face, Lu Buwei walked forward. Without bowing to goddess Miao Xian, he went straight to the desk and studied the painting of crabapple blossoms sleeping in spring for a full 15 minutes. At last, he sighed and shook his head. Goddess Miao Xian's beady eyes went as wide as goose eggs as she cried out sternly, "Shaking your head? What do you mean by that?" Lu Buwei breathed out a deep sigh. He cupped his fist and bowed deeply to goddess Miao Xian as he said, "Goddess, you should not have drawn this painting." "Humph." Goddess Miao Xian snorted coldly, her eyes bursting with killing intent as she said with a cold grin, "Oh? What do you mean by that?" Wisps of golden light shot out from within her body, as a large golden Taoist robe was draped over her body. A golden wheel of light, about 2 feet in diameter and seemingly forged from pure gold, emerged from behind her head. Vaguely, countless skeletons clad in fine gauze could be seen forming a formation that looked like a lotus flower, dancing gracefully and gracefully. Lu Buwei straightened his body and studied the painting. He did not say a word for a long time. The killing intent in goddess Miao Xian's eyes grew stronger and stronger. Within the golden wheel of light behind her head, flesh and blood were growing out of the skeletons, transforming into beautiful girls. These girls were pointing and whispering at Lu Buwei through the golden wheel, their chuckles drifting out of the wheel and echoing in the palace. Just as Goddess Miao Xian was about to lose control of her killing intent and was about to attack Lu Buwei sighed once again. He shook his head and said, "Goddess, with this painting of yours, how would all the painters in all the heavenly realms and Panga continent have the courage to paint again?" Pointing his finger at the painting, Lu Buwei cried bitterly, "Once this painting of yours is done, no one in the whole universe will have the face to wield a brush or use ink anymore." "Oh, Goddess, even if there is a tiny flaw in your painting, it would still be fine, but it is so natural, as if it is a living creature that has been sealed in the painting. How can other painters rely on a lousy brush to deceive people in the future? With such a masterpiece of yours before me, there is no other painting under the heavens that can enter my eyes." Goddess Miao Xian cried out happily. She nodded her head and said, "Old Lu, you have a good eye. I also think this painting is not bad. Of course, you have overpraised me, and you can't say that in the future." While laughing out loud, Goddess Miao Xian turned her head and looked to the left, then to the right. The more she looked, the better she felt her painting was. Clapping her hands, she pointed at the two maidservants standing next to her and said with a smile, "Go, put away the painting properly. Put away all the brushes and ink. How are things in the mine these days? I've promised a great bodhisattva in Fa Hua heavenly realm that when his youngest disciple finishes his apprenticeship in 2 days, I'll give him some Northern Ocean dark gold copper ores as a favor." Lu Buwei smiled faintly. With his hands clasped behind his back, he stared at Goddess Miao Xian, who was beaming with joy and said, "Didn't Goddess order the newcomer, Taoist Wu Wang, to be the deputy supervisor? I didn't take care of the mine's affairs and let him handle it. Patriarch is coming up here to rest in a few days, and I'm preparing the immortal wine and fruits that Patriarch likes the most, as well as the virgin boy with the innate 7 kills innate life, for Patriarch to enjoy." Goddess Miao Xian cried out in surprise. She slapped her own head and said hastily, "Master is coming up here to rest. Isn't that right? Another 49 days have passed. Hurry up and prepare. It's better to put the affairs in the mine aside for the time being." Lu Buwei smiled, then bowed deeply and said, "Just as Goddess said." A cold gleam flashed in the depth of Lu Buwei's eyes as he bowed his head, and his lips curved into a cruel smile. Chapter 492. Inside the pitch-black mine, the supervising yikshaws were ferociously herding the cultivators together. Wu Qi was standing on top of a tall stalagmite, looking down at the miners just like how Lu Buwei did a few days ago. With a single arm clasped behind his back, he was staring coldly at the several thousand cultivators down below. No sound could be heard in the mine. No matter it was the yikshaws or the cultivators, all of them could see an ominous sign from Wu Qi's face. These were the cultivators who came to the Northern Ocean to purchase aquatic products, or accidentally trespassed into the Northern Ocean. They were captured alive by Miaoying Palace and brought to the mine. Their belongings were plundered, and they were forced to work as oxen and horses, living a life worse than that of pigs and dogs. Regardless of the reason, when Wu Qi came here, he had tried his best to improve their working and living conditions, and even saved them from the danger of being slaughtered by the yikshaws. Wu Qi thought that he had done a great favor to these cultivators, but they had actually repaid him like this. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi transmitted his voice to the surrounding yikshaws, asking them to point out those cultivators who were still completing their tasks according to their quality and quantity. Although the intelligence of these yikshaws was slightly low, their innate talent and instinct were very strong. They were like the most loyal old dogs, and they had a very good memory. Riding on sword beams, several dozens of yikshaws soared into the sky, wheeling above the several thousand cultivators and pointing out several hundred cultivators who were still completing their tasks. With an order, these cultivators were brought to a side by the yikshaws. Wu Qi gave these cultivators a glance and said in a deep voice, "You have been working hard these few days, and you deserve to be rewarded. From today onwards, you will be the foreman of the mine. You are no longer required to work, and all your quotas will be completed by your subordinates." The several hundred cultivators who were brought out were taken aback at first, but they were immediately overjoyed. Some of the more cowardly cultivators hastily dropped to their knees, kowtowing and thanking Wu Qi. Some others cupped their fists and bowed deeply to Wu Qi as well, their faces filled with joyful smiles. With a sneer, Wu Qi pointed at the several thousand miners who had complicated expressions on their faces. Some of them were indifferent, some were sneering, some were cold, and some were indifferent. He sent a voice transmission to the Yikshaws and said, "Beat them as you like, but don't break their bones. Let them continue mining." The Yikshaws laughed joyfully. For the past few days, Wu Qi had not allowed them to kill cultivators for fun, and had not allowed them to beat cultivators for fun. The Yikshaws, who were fierce and barbaric by nature, had been suppressing their anger. Today, with Wu Qi's instructions, these Yikshaws happily picked up their swords and sabers and were about to pounce on the crowd of cultivators. However, before they could make a move, Wu Qi snorted coldly. The Yikshaws were shocked and hurriedly threw down their swords and sabers, pulling out the whips wrapped around their waists. Accompanied by harsh, hideous laughter, nearly 1,000 Yikshaws rushed into the crowd, waving their whips and lashing at the several thousand cultivators who were slacking off their work. The whips tore through the air and produced ear-piercing whistling noises, causing several thousand cultivators to roll and roll on the ground. The Yikshaws had a very strong brute force, and with just one whip, they could break a rock. Cultivators had very tough bodies, and even though they were not body cultivators, their bodies were still a few times stronger than ordinary people. The whips of the Yikshaws produced loud cracking noises on the cultivators' bodies, and each lash left a bloody mark on the cultivators' bodies. The several thousand cultivators, who had their energy depleted, dared not to fight back. They could only hold their heads in their hands, twisting and twitching on the ground, roaring and struggling. Very soon, the ground was covered with blood that dripped from their bodies. The brutal beating lasted for a full 2 hours. Standing on top of a stalagmite, Wu Qi looked coldly at the cultivators who were covered with cuts and bruises. Among the several thousand cultivators, a few dozen body cultivators could not withstand the storm-like whipping of the Yikshaws. They fell to the ground, their eyes rolled back and their bodies twitching like fish out of water. There were even some cultivators who specialized in magical power and Tao, but their bodies were extremely weak. After a round of whipping, they had long fainted from the pain. If not for the long life force of cultivators, which was several hundred times stronger than that of ordinary human beings, the Yikshaws would have long beaten them to death. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi raised his head and stared coldly at the pitch-black rock strata above the mine. During the past few days, those who have mined the least amount of ores, or those who have not mined a single piece of ore, he said grimly, "I want 100 of them." The Yikshaws laughed evilly. Following Wu Qi's request, they captured 100 cultivators with pale faces. The Yikshaws panted heavily and excitedly. They liked this kind of brutal beating, liked the smell of blood that lingered in the air, and liked the murderous aura and killing intent emanating from Wu Qi when he turned cold. "I've given you a chance." With his hands clasped behind his back, Wu Qi floated straight up into the air, hovering above the heads of the 100 cultivators who were picked out, their faces pale with fear. "But, you didn't cherish it. And in this world, there are some things that you should never do. Once you've done it, you have to pay the price." Pointing his finger at the sky, Wu Qi cried out sternly, "I don't care what Supervisor Lu promised you, or what benefits he gave you. Now, I'm in charge here. Those who obey me will prosper, and those who oppose me will die. Goddess has appointed me as the deputy supervisor of the mine, and your lives are in my hands." Among the 100 cultivators who were picked out, a short female cultivator rushed out, crying and throwing herself to the ground. Kneeling before Wu Qi's feet, she cried, "Taoist priest, senior, supervisor, I was possessed. Supervisor, he promised us that as long as we made you look bad, he would give us." Wu Qi gave the female cultivator a cold glance, then pointed his finger at her. The female cultivator's body floated up into the air, and in the blink of an eye, he grabbed her by the throat. It was the most vicious and cruel technique in the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture, the technique that harmed others to benefit oneself the most. Wu Qi's palm moved slightly, and the female cultivator's body suddenly twitched. A hoarse and desperate howl came out from her mouth. In just a short moment, the female cultivator's body turned into a puff of ashes and dissipated in the air. A low-grade spirit stone fell from the ashes of the female cultivator, clanging against the ground for a few times. A piece of lower-grade energy stone, this was the reason why this female cultivator and the other cultivators went against Wu Qi. For immortal cultivators, only those Xiantian cultivators would value a piece of lower-grade energy stone. But in this mine, for the sake of a piece of lower-grade energy stone, over 90% of the cultivators had listened to the orders given by Lu Bui's executing disciples, secretly slacking off to teach Wu Qi a lesson. All the energy essence in the female cultivator's body was completely absorbed by Wu Qi. An enormous amount of energy essence rushed into Wu Qi's body, and was quickly transformed into a dense fiend energy. The fiend energy in Wu Qi's dantian quickly condensed, and in a blink of an eye, the embryo of Jin Dan began to take shape. A dense black mist enveloped Wu Qi's entire body, turning Wu Qi's body hazy. Only a pair of blood-red eyes could be vaguely seen amidst the black mist. Laughing evilly, Wu Qi waved his 5 fingers and unleashed 5 streams of black mist, transforming into a gigantic black net that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, falling down from the sky. 99 cultivators howled miserably together. They had recognized the method used by Wu Qi. It was the most vicious technique of the Fiend League, a technique that seized all the life force and energy of others, mercilessly plundering all the energy in the bodies of immortal cultivators and turning it into his own. As the saying goes, the heaven cherishes every living thing, and always leaves a slim chance of survival. Only a cultivation technique of the Fiend League, the most vicious, cruel, evil, and cruel one, could plunder everything in such a blatant way, leaving no chance of reincarnation. The black mist enveloped all 99 cultivators, and in a blink of an eye, their bodies were turned into ashes by Qi. An enormous amount of blood essence and energy surged into Wu Qi's body, and were transformed into Inferno Hell Fiend harnesses by his Jin Dan. Before long, the Inferno Hell Fiend infant was formed again. The Inferno Hell Fiend infant, which emitted a strong smell of rotting corpses, was rolling inside Wu Qi's body. He threw his head back and roared hoarsely, unleashing a boundless killing intent that swept across the entire mine. I gave you face, but you refused. Wu Qi's voice came rumbling out of the pitch-black fiend energy like a thunderclap. Steward Lu can give you a piece of low-grade spirit stone, or more low-grade spirit stones. Apart from food and water, I won't give you anything else. I only know how to plunder, and my target is your lives. Be obedient and work hard in the mine, and you can live, enjoy food and water. If you don't listen to me and work hard in the mine, you will die. The newly formed Inferno Hell Fiend infant rushed out of Wu Qi's body, emanating a strong fiend light. Accompanied by a sharp whistle, it soared into the sky and quickly circled around several thousand cultivators. These cultivators had varying cultivation bases. The strongest among them was as strong as a lower-tier heaven immortal, while the weakest was as strong as a Jin Dan. However, regardless of their cultivation bases, all of them had exhausted all their energy. The Inferno Hell Fiend infant let out a shrill cry and kept shooting out beams of black light, leaving a vicious Inferno Hell Fiend curse in these cultivators' immortal souls and nascent divinities. With a cold laugh, Wu Qi gave a thought in his mind. Immediately, a faint black fiend flame burst out from the bodies of several thousand cultivators who had been cursed by the Inferno Hell Fiend curse. It was bone-piercing cold, yet scorching hot at the same time. The strange fiend flame made the several thousand cultivators roll and roar, and some even died from the pain. From today onwards, call me master. Wu Qi stared coldly at the several thousand cultivators who had been completely controlled by him. Then, he turned to look at the cultivators who were selected to be the supervisors, and said to them in a very kind tone, from now on, you can just call me supervisor. You are different from these people. You are humans, while they are just pigs and dogs. Taking a deep breath, Wu Qi said, repaying evil with kindness. Ha, what a stupid thing to do. Repaying kindness with kindness, and repaying evil with justice. Excellent, excellent. After being taught a lesson by Yuanhua sect, Wu Qi's way of doing things had become much more bloodthirsty and ruthless. Inside Miaoying Palace, goddess Miao Xian, who was sitting on a soft chair, suddenly laughed. She pointed her finger at Lu Buwei, who was standing next to her, and said in a cold voice, "From now on, Wu Wang will be in charge of the mine." "Old man, you are very good at serving people. From now on, you will be in charge of master's daily needs." "Humph." After a brief pause, goddess Miao Xian smiled and said, "This Taoist Wu Wang is a ruthless man, and he is practicing the orthodox cultivation technique of the Fiend League. Excellent, he is a talented man. Master likes this kind of ruthless men. Pass my order, summon Taoist Wu Wang to see me." A maidservant answered immediately, transforming into a beam of dark light and shooting out from the palace. Lu Buwei's face twitched, and his steady gaze couldn't help but scatter. Chapter 493. Wu Qi stood at the entrance of a mine, holding a lower-grade energy stone in his hand as he quietly absorbed the energy within it. He had robbed several thousand cultivators, and plundered all the lower-grade energy stones given by Lu Buwei. He kept half of them for himself, and gave 40% to the several hundred overseers, and 60% to those yakshas. No matter it was those cultivators whose energies were depleted, and whose nascent souls and nascent divinities were withered, or those extremely poor yakshas, all of them were overjoyed. One of them regarded Wu Qi as their second parent, while the other regarded him as the one who provided them with food and clothing. The energy contained in a lower-grade energy stone was about 3 months' supply for a peak-stage Xiantian cultivator. If it were a Jin Dan cultivator, it would only take him half a month to absorb a lower-grade energy stone. But, a nascent soul cultivator could absorb all the energy within it in just 1 hour. In just the time it took to finish a pot of tea, when Wu Qi held the energy stone in his hand, there was not a single drop of energy left in it. Then, he clasped his palm together and crushed the energy stone. With one arm clasped behind his back, Wu Qi looked at those cultivators who were working hard in the mine, and could not help but shake his head. Sure enough, some people could not be treated nicely, and could only be threatened with violence and death. After their nascent divinities and immortal souls were controlled by Wu Qi, each and every one of them worked like a madman, as if they had been fed with stimulants. Judging by their vigor, the amount of ores they mined in just 15 minutes was comparable to the amount of ores they mined in 2 hours. 4 times the work efficiency, a full 4 times the work efficiency. Wu Qi kept sighing in his mind. Why did they not cherish the good conditions they were given 2 days ago? Why did they put their lives in the palm of Wu Qi's hand, and that was the only reason they worked so hard? Sighing faintly, Wu Qi threw away the powder in his palm, spun, and flew towards the cave where he lived. Since I had presented the fragrant Ganoderma to her, and I had purposely shown her an evil and vicious fiend cultivation technique, I reckoned that goddess Miao Xian would want to meet me, right? The fragrant Ganoderma was a great favor, and as he was a cultivator from the Fiend League and the deputy supervisor of the mine, goddess Miaoxin should meet him. Only by meeting goddess Miao Xian would he be able to plan his next step. While he was pondering over these questions, a beam of dark light flew out from one of the caves. A maidservant with a slender figure and a beautiful face landed before him, then said in a sweet voice, "Supervisor Wu, Fairy Wu is asking you to go to her." He, Chief Steward Wu is so impressive today." Wu Qi gave the maidservant a look, and he was immediately shocked by what he saw. This maid seemed to be a young girl of 14 or 15 years of age, but there was a trace of ruthlessness and viciousness in the corner of her eyes and the tip of her brows, as well as her mature charm and style. All of this told him that this was an old demon with the appearance of a young girl. What shocked him the most was that there was a ring of faint fiend light behind the young girl's head. It was formed by 3 layers of fiend wheels, inlaid with 9 exquisite fiend marks, each of which was emanating a faint aura that made one's heart palpitate. She was at least a heaven immortal, and she was definitely a middle-tier heaven immortal or above. In other words, she was a 27th-tier heaven immortal. Wu Qi dared not to show any neglect. He cupped his fist and said to the maid, Junior Wu Wang offers greetings, Senior. The maid, who was smiling like a young girl in love just a moment ago, smiled reservedly, but her face was now filled with a dignified and cold look. She nodded and said, you are a sensible girl. No wonder you presented the fragrant Ganoderma so obediently. Come with me. The maid snorted lightly, then transformed into a beam of black light and flew away. Wu Qi hastily transformed into a clump of dark mist and chased after her with a billowing fiend aura. Wu Qi had no idea what kind of escape art the maid was using, but he dared not to use all the innate escape arts and the acquired magnetic sword escape art. Therefore, he could only use the fiend cloud escape art found in the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture to follow her. The speed of the fiend cloud escape art was considered to be very fast, but in just a few breaths, the maid had left a great distance behind, forcing her to stop and wait for Wu Qi. Laughing dryly, Wu Qi came close to the maid in the form of a fiend cloud. While flying at top speed, he asked, "Thank you for your understanding, Senior. May I know your name, Senior?" The maidservant giggled. She gave Wu Qi a glance with her watery eyes, then turned to look at his broken arm. She did not try to hide the disappointment on her face. She looked like a housewife who had gone to the market to pick a chicken, only to find out that the chicken she liked was not an authentic chicken, but one that had been raised with fodder. Needless to say, she was disappointed. She sighed lightly, then said coolly, "I'm Elder Miao Xian's personal maidservant, Miao Feng." After a brief pause, she continued, "Miao Yu is with Elder Miao Yu. She is not as easy to talk to as I am. When you meet her later, you must be respectful." Wu Qi answered, then followed closely behind Miao Feng and flew upward into the mine. After flying for nearly 1,000 miles, they finally saw a faint gleam coming from the front. A beam of dark light and a fiend cloud rushed out of the mine and plunged into the deep ocean. About 100 miles ahead of them was Miaoying Palace, which was surrounded by tall pagodas and hovering in the middle of the ocean. Wu Qi turned to look at the entrance of the mine, and he could not help but feel shocked. 6 altars were seen hovering near the entrance, on top of which sat 36 Taoists clad in black robes, their faces as pale as a sheet of paper, holding bone swords enshrouded in a green gleam in their hands. Around the altars were numerous vague figures of fiend gods and fiends. It was the most profound mystic technique of controlling fiends in the Fiend League. The entrance of the mine was right on top of a spirit cave in the mine. Guarded by the 6 altars and countless fiend gods and fiends, the entire mine had been compressed into an impregnable fortress. Unless the cultivators in the mine could surpass the combined forces of 36 fiend cultivators and countless fiend gods and fiends, they would never be able to break out of the mine. On top of that, the Nether Ocean Dark Gold Copper Mine had a unique property of absorbing natural energies. As a result, the cultivators who were imprisoned in the mine would not be able to break out even when their energies and immortal energies were fully replenished. What shocked Wu Qi was that each of the 36 Taoists who guarded the mine had a fiend wheel hovering behind their heads, and the number of fiend runes and talismans in the wheel varied. The least among them was only 3, and the most was a few times more than Miao Feng. They gazed at Wu Qi with a blank and emotionless gaze. Wu Qi felt goosebumps all over his skin, and a chill ran down his spine. They are the 36 fiend guards who serve under Elder. When Miao Feng saw that Wu Qi was interested in these black-clothed Taoists, she smiled and introduced them. Usually, when Elder needs to do some miscellaneous things, he will ask them to do. To put it bluntly, they are just Elder's henchmen. You don't have to pay too much attention to them. Wu Qi blinked his eyes and said as if nothing had happened, 36 fiend guards, I can feel that each and every one of them has a very profound cultivation base. Just a glance from them made me want to kill them all. TSK, the cultivation base of these seniors is really unfathomable. Miao Feng shook her head disapprovingly and said, it is because your cultivation base is too weak, not because of their high cultivation base. They are only qualified to do such trivial things. Wu Qi did not say another word. Both of them had flown to the front entrance of Miaoying Palace. The front entrance of Miaoying Palace was built using the same material made of bones. It was a huge archway, 9 stories tall and 18 bays wide. The pillars of the archway were made of beast bones, each about 10 feet in diameter. No one knew what kind of huge beast they were from. Similar to the 4 pagodas, the archway was shrouded with wisps of green phosphorescence, illuminating the surroundings with a dim light that gave everything a greenish hue. In each of the 18 bays of the archway stood a burly man, who stood several tens of feet tall. Obviously, these burly men were from the Longbow Kingdom. Their bodies were densely covered with dark fiend marks, and a very strong fiend aura was emanating from their bodies. Their eyes shone with a faint blood-red gleam, and the whites and black of their eyes could not be seen. There were also fiend marks hovering behind their heads. There were 6 layers of fiend marks on each of them, and there were at least 100 bizarre fiend marks and talismans hovering in the middle of them. Following behind Miao Feng, Wu Qi took a few steps toward the archway. Suddenly, these burly men widened their eyes and gave Wu Qi a glare at the same time. An enormous aura that made one feel despair was emanating from their bodies, while the fiend wheels behind their heads shone brightly. The fiend aura that seemed to have materialized transformed into 18 giant fiend beasts that one could see with naked eyes, pouncing and biting at Wu Qi. Wu Qi's body turned stiff and trembled violently, and he could not stand up straight before these fiend beasts. Right at this moment, the iron medallion hanging on Wu Qi's waist emitted a beam of green light and wrapped him up. The 18 burly men snorted at the same time, and the fiend beasts transformed from fiend aura quickly fused back into their bodies. 2 burly men in the middle stepped to the left and right, making way for Wu Qi to enter Miaoying Palace. Miao Feng smiled coolly and said, "They are the 18 holy guards, 18 heaven immortals from the Longbow Kingdom who were carefully selected and cultivated by Patriarch. Although they are only heaven immortals, their overall strength is more than enough to fight a gold immortal." Wu Qi gasped with astonishment. He knew very well about the potential of the Longbow people, as he had once cultivated 10,000 of them. However, before these Longbow people could grow up, they were turned into ashes by the primordial gold talisman. But now, there were 18 heaven immortals from the Longbow Kingdom, whose overall strength was comparable to a gold immortal. How much effort did the Patriarch of Miaoying Palace spend on these 18 holy guards? Miao Feng was very satisfied with the shocked expression on Wu Qi's face. She led Wu Qi into Miaoying Palace step by step, carefully reminding him where he could go and where he could not get close to. Since the Patriarch of Miaoying Palace was from the Fiend League, it was only natural that she behaved in the manner of the Fiend League. Every single brick in Miaoying Palace was hiding an infinite amount of killing intent, and a slight carelessness could turn one's bones and flesh into ashes. It was just a tunnel behind the palace gate, a journey of tens of miles, but there were no less than 3,000 layers of vicious restrictive spells lying in ambush, and each of them was more ferocious, cruel, and merciless than the last. Wu Qi listened to Miao Feng's explanation, his body breaking out in cold sweat. There were so many restrictive spells, and they were so vicious that Wu Qi began to suspect that the Patriarch of Miaoying Palace was a psychopath. Not only were there many restrictive spells, but there were so many formations in Miaoying Palace that even Wu Qi could not decipher. It was this that really threw Wu Qi into a panic. Through his mystic eyes of universe, he found every single formation in Miaoying Palace to be very familiar, but they all gave him a feeling that they were not. As a result, he could not decipher any of them at all. In other words, even with the knowledge of countless formations recorded in the Scroll of Stealing, Wu Qi was still unable to move an inch in Miaoying Palace. This was the first time in his life that Wu Qi had fallen into complete despair. If he could not even decipher the formation diagrams, how was he going to go to the land of 9E negate yang to obtain the thread of innate yang energy? Chapter 494. Carefully, he exercised the mystic eyes of universe and scanned through all the formations and restrictive spells along the way. Inch by inch, Wu Qi's heart sank into a bottomless abyss, just like the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean where he was now. All this while, whether it was the cultivators from the 6 dynasties, the immortals from White Cloud Immortal Sect, Yuanhua Sect, Yu Miao, Yuha, or the numerous cultivators and immortals he encountered on Pangu continent, with the mysterious and unfathomable formations and restrictive spells in the Scroll of Stealing, Wuqi had a great psychological and practical advantage. There was no formation that he could not see through, no restrictive spell that he could not break, and no secret that he could not understand. But now, in Miaoying Palace, Wuqi finally realized that the Scroll of Stealing was no longer his reliance. The shadowy figure who passed him the Scroll of Stealing was too ancient, so ancient that he had been out of touch with the world of cultivators for too long. He had mastered countless mysteries of formations and restrictive spells, and these mysteries were indeed all-encompassing, even pointing to the core mysteries of the Tao of formations between the heaven and earth. But, too many years had passed, and the people at the bottom of the world of cultivators, such as cultivators and lower-tier heaven immortals, were still immersed in the superficial mysteries of formations and restrictive spells. What they knew was not beyond the scope of what was recorded in the Scroll of Stealing. Therefore, when faced with the formations and restrictive spells laid out by them, Wuqi could easily break them like a piece of tofu with a sharp knife. However, it was obvious that the Patriarch of Miaoying Palace had her own research in both formations and restrictive spells, and had gained some new enlightenment. Therefore, in Wuqi's eyes, all the countless restrictive spells and formations in Miaoying Palace seemed to be vague at the same time. He seemed to understand them, but at the same time, he could not understand them at all. He had a rough idea of how they worked, but could not really figure out their profound mysteries. Wuqi's heart was extremely heavy. Since the Patriarch of Miaoying Palace had such an unfathomable ability, it meant that her disciples must have inherited some of her knowledge in formations and restrictive spells as well. At the very least, when it came to dealing with the successor of Miaoying Palace, the restrictive spells and formations that Wuqi was an expert in could no longer help him. Unless he could obtain the legacy of Miaoying Palace's formations and restrictive spells, then study them with great effort. In Wuqi's eyes, the Miaoying Palace before his eyes was like an impregnable fortress, and he was just a weak ant outside the fortress. There was no way he could find a way to sneak into it. Without Miao Feng leading the way, Wuqi had no doubt that he would have been killed by these restrictive spells right after he stepped into Miaoying Palace. What made Wuqi even angrier was that he couldn't comprehend the mysteries of these restrictions in a short time, and the power of these restrictions was frighteningly strong. In the ancient residence where he obtained the innate yin and yang qi, the restriction of the core cave abode was already extremely strong. Although the formation was very simple, it still prevented Wuqi from entering. On the other hand, the power of all the restrictive spells and formations in Miaoying Palace was at least 100 times stronger than the one in the ancient residence. Even though Wuqi was an expert in all the restrictive spells and formations in this place, he still did not have the power to break any of them, even the weakest one. There was no way out. With Wuqi's current overall strength, and with the Tao of formations and restrictive spells he inherited from Scroll of Stealing, it was impossible for him to enter the land of 9 yin negate yang and obtain the thread of innate yin and yang energy. Just now, when Wuqi was standing in front of Miaoying Palace's entrance, he looked down and saw the entrance of the land of 9 yin negate yang with pitch-black smoke billowing out from it. He could even vaguely sense a force calling out to him from down below, resonating with the innate yin and yang energy hiding in his meridians. Because of this force, the 7 stealing heaven meridians, which had shrunk into a ball and looked like a shriveled seed near Wuqi's severed arm, burst out uncontrollably. The 5 innate nascent souls hiding in the tangled meridians were restless as well, nearly spraying out their innate energy essence to stimulate Wuqi to regrow his severed arm. Forcibly suppressing the 7 stealing heaven meridians, which were throbbing in his severed arm and made the muscles near his severed arm ache, Wuqi followed closely behind Miao Feng and strode into a lavishly decorated grand hall in Miaoying Palace. Upon entering the grand hall, Wuqi immediately heard the giggling of a lady. He raised his head slightly and gave the hall a glance. He saw a lady with a donkey face and dark skin, who was shaped like a round ball, hugging and kissing a beautiful girl with a slender body. Both of them were as intimate as a pair of lovers. The donkey-faced lady even reached her hand into the girl's underwear and kept groping around. Lu Bue stood off to the side with his eyes fixed on the tip of his feet. It was as if he was standing in a deserted wasteland, and the enchanting scene around him did not exist at all. All of a sudden, the girl's underwear slid down, revealing a pair of slender, well-proportioned, fair and tender legs that looked like they were glowing in the sun. The girl spread her legs apart, revealing 3 inches below her navel. A boundless sensual charm immediately came rushing at Wu Qi's face. Wu Qi quickly bowed his head and calmed his mind in an instant. Even the speed of his heartbeat did not change at all. The donkey-faced lady, Goddess Miao Xian, smiled satisfyingly. She patted the girl's buttocks, then loosened her grip and let go of the girl. She spread her legs like a man and sat on a soft chair, glaring fiercely at Wu Qi. Miao Feng giggled. Twisting her hips, she came next to Goddess Miao Xian and said in a sweet voice, "Goddess, you only know how to spoil Miao Yu. Feng'er has just gone out for a while, and Miao Yu has already come to seduce Goddess. Feng'er will never let her do that." Goddess Miao Xian laughed out loud. With one swift move, she wrapped her arms around Miao Feng's waist and planted a few kisses on her face. Only then did she point her finger at Wu Qi and said, "Daoist Wu Wang. This is not a good Daoist name. Wu Wang, it's hopeless. Doesn't that mean he has a boundless future?" Wu Qi laughed dryly. He cupped his fist and bowed deeply as he said, "Wu Wang, the deputy supervisor of the mine, offers greetings to Goddess." Wu Qi did not mention that there was something wrong with his name, nor did he ask Goddess Miao Xian to give him another Daoist name. The name Wu Wang was the pseudonym of the only master in his heart. How could he allow Goddess Miao Xian, a deformed and wicked woman, to change it at will? Goddess Miao Xian licked her lips with her long, red tongue. She gave Wu Qi a sidelong glance, then slapped Miao Feng's buttocks lazily and said with a smile, "I've asked you here today to tell you something. The way you dealt with those lowly bastards down there just now was exactly what I wanted. They gave me the flavor of an immortal from the Fiend League, and I like it more than that old fogey, Lu Buwei." She gave Lu Buwei a look and said, "Lu Buwei, from now on, Wu Wang will be in charge of all the affairs in the mine. You are good at serving people, and you know how to please them. From now on, you will be in charge of Master's daily necessities." She paused for a brief moment, then wisps of golden gleam shone from her eyes as she snapped at Lu Buwei, "But, you have to remember one thing. Don't use the same trick you used to please me to please Master. Hee, it is not your turn to do these things. As for Master, it is better for him to have us, the disciples, to get close to him. If you dare to say something that you should not say in front of Master, don't blame me for being merciless." Goddess Miao Xian's words were straightforward and overbearing, filled with the naked flavor unique to cultivators from the Fiend League. Lu Buwei bowed respectfully at Goddess Miao Xian, then said in a steady voice, "I understand. Even if I want to please Patriarch, only you, Goddess, have the right to do so. If I have any good ideas, I will present them to you immediately." Goddess Miao Xian laughed and tilted her head up complacently. Wu Qi narrowed his eyes and stood off to the side with his hands hanging at his sides. His eyes darted from side to side, and suddenly, he saw a colorful painting of 3 beautiful ladies sleeping on a long table. The 3 serving ladies were so vivid and lifelike, as if 3 beautiful ladies were embedded in the painting, filled with an indescribable sense of vitality. With Lu Xiaobai's experience and foresight, he could tell that the person who drew the painting had a soft and charming handwriting, filled with an ambiguous and charming pink aura. It was a lady with a soft heart, longing for the love of a man. Lu Xiaobai had countless unorthodox skills, such as judging the painter's character by the handwriting and style of the painting. This was only one of the countless unorthodox skills that he was good at, and that was all. Judging from the handwriting and style of the painting, the person who drew it must be a woman among women, a woman of the highest quality, brimming with the charm of a woman. As the saying goes, women are like water, it perfectly described such a person. When Goddess Miao Xian saw that Wu Qi was studying the painting, she could not help but smile and ask, "Wu Wang, what do you think of this painting?" Lu Buwei raised his head abruptly, fixing his eyes on Wu Qi. He wanted to see how Wu Qi was going to deal with Goddess Miao Xian. Over the past 2 years, he had been trapped in the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, and it was only by flattering goddess Miao Xian that he managed to survive. He wanted to see if Wu Qi, the uninvited guest who had robbed him of his position as the supervisor of the mine, was as good as his eloquence. Wu Qi did not say a word. He came before the table, standing less than 3 inches away from the painting. After observing its details at a close distance, he nodded his head slowly and breathed out a sigh as if he had realized something. His pretentious act made goddess Miao Xian so anxious that her lips were about to bubble. Slapping on the armrest of the couch, she cried out, "Stop whining. Tell me what you think of this painting." Shaking his head, Wu Qi walked 2 rounds around the table, then threw his head back and breathed out a long sigh once again. A fierce gleam shone in goddess Miao Xian's eyes as she snapped, "Tell me, what do you think of this painting?" Without batting an eyelid, Lu Buwei looked at Wu Qi, a faint smile spreading across his face. After a brief moment of silence, Wu Qi turned to give goddess Miao Xian a look. After a brief moment of pondering, he threw his head back and said with a sigh, "It's a good painting. Unfortunately, the person is even better. The person who painted this painting is truly a woman among women, the finest of all women." A dead silence reigned the great hall. Lu Buwei bowed his head and did not say a word. Miao Feng and Miao Yu bowed their heads as well, while goddess Miao Xian was staring blankly at Wu Qi, blinking her eyes. No one knew what was going through her mind. After a full 10 minutes, goddess Miao Xian breathed out a long sigh, shook her head, and said with a bitter smile, "Wu Wang, I really wish I could kill you with one palm strike." Wu Qi cupped his fist at goddess Miao Xian and said in a panicked manner, "Why do you say that, goddess?" Goddess Miao Xian remained silent for a long while. Finally, she waved her hand and said coolly, "Never mind, I'm not going to argue with a bunch of ants like you." Upon seeing the ever-changing expression on goddess Miao Xian's face, Wu Qi and Lu Buwei dared not to say another word, and hastily left the great hall. Right after they left the great hall, goddess Miao Xian suddenly cried out in a deep voice, "Wu Wang, did you destroy all your magical items during the battle with that enemy?" Wu Qi was taken aback. He quickly turned his head and answered, "Goddess Miao Xian is right. Wu Wang did not even have a flying sword with him." Goddess Miao Xian remained silent for a brief moment, then waved her hand and said with a sigh, "Miao Feng, bring him to the storeroom and pick 2 defensive items for him. I'm tired today." Miao Feng walked out of the great hall with a blank expression, her head filled with confusion. The door closed behind her. Very soon, the sound of goddess Miao Xian and Miao Yu playing with each other could be heard echoing out from the great hall. Lu Buwei stared at Wu Qi with a gloomy expression. Upon sensing his gaze, Wu Qi suddenly turned his head and gave him a faint smile. Chapter 495. While walking along the passage leading to the storehouse, Wu Qi suddenly laughed as he recalled the bizarre smile on Lu Buwei's face. Lu Buwei had actually come to Panga continent 2 years earlier than him. What kind of method did he use to travel so fast? And what was he trying to do by staying in Miaoying Palace? But, no matter what he is trying to do, I'll just have to destroy him. If I have no other choice, I'll just have to kill him. But, at the thought that he might have to kill Lu Buwei with his own hands, Wu Qi's heart was filled with a complicated and tangled emotion. I don't want to kill him, I really don't want to. If you were to kill a man like Lu Buwei, the Daqin's chancellor, it would be like a colorful painting suddenly losing a touch of color. I don't want to kill him, I really don't want to. Miao Yu led the way while swaying her slender waist. Intentionally or unintentionally, her round buttocks were swaying in front of Wu Qi's eyes. Her jiggling flesh was like a deep well, emanating a strong temptation that could make one want to be intoxicated by it. Wu Qi stared at Miao Yu's buttocks for a while, then suddenly asked with a smile, "Senior Miao Yu, how many years have you been following Fairy Miao Yu? I can be considered as a disciple of Miaoying Palace now, but I still don't know the background of Miaoying Palace." Miao Yu could feel Wu Qi's gaze lingering on her body. As an immortal cultivator, her 5 senses were the strongest, and Wuqi did not try to hide his gaze. His scorching gaze made her feel warm all over her body, and it was a very pleasant feeling. Miao Yu giggled, then turned her head slightly over her shoulder and began to introduce Miaoying Palace to Wuqi while leading the way. The Miaoying Palace at the bottom of the dark abyss of Northern Ocean was just a projection of the Miaoying Palace in Nine Heavenly Realm. It was a temporary imperial residence that the Lord of Miaoying Palace in Nine Heavenly Realm had projected into the dark abyss of Northern Ocean with an almighty divine ability. Patriarch Miaoying possessed the cultivation base of primordial immortal, but to what extent, Miao Yu had no idea. Goddess Miao Xian was the most favored disciple of Patriarch Miaoying. She was in charge of all the internal and external affairs of Miaoying Palace, and even had the power to decide the life and death of all the disciples of Miaoying Palace. 10,000 years ago, when Patriarch Miaoying built her temporary imperial residence, she was going to craft a supreme-grade primordial immortal item at the bottom of the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean. As Patriarch Miaoying's most intimate disciple, Goddess Miao Xian had brought along a large group of guards and serving ladies to serve her. I see. Wuqi nodded as if he was suddenly enlightened. With a pleasantly surprised expression, he lowered his voice and said to Miao Yu with a smile, "Senior Miao Yu, I didn't expect Miaoying Palace's patriarch to be such a legendary figure. Now that I am fated to join Miaoying Palace, I hope Senior can take good care of me in the future." Miao Yu laughed. She walked forward for a distance, lowered her voice, pointed at Wuqi and said, "Do you still need us to take care of you? What you said just now was very good. You don't know how happy the fairy is in her heart. You have a bright future ahead of you, so why would you need me to take care of you?" A hint of astonishment appeared on Wuqi's face, and he asked hastily, "What do you mean by that, Senior?" Miao Yu sighed, shook her head, and said, "That painting was painted by Goddess herself. What you said just now was very good, very wonderful, and Goddess is very happy about it. Although Goddess's appearance is slightly lacking now, but Goddess is truly a good girl with the most beautiful features under the heaven." The heart of a woman among women? Wuqi narrowed his eyes. Perhaps it was because she had kept this matter in her heart for too long, or because Wuqi did not seem to be a threat to her, or because Wuqi had already won Goddess Miao Xian's favor. Miao Yu felt that it was not a big deal for her to tell Wuqi. Therefore, after a brief moment of silence, she told Wuqi what she wanted to say. A long time ago, about several 100,000 years ago, Goddess Miao Xian was still an extremely beautiful girl. During the realms of nascent soul, nascent divinity, and after becoming an immortal, every time a cultivator advanced to a higher realm, as long as they survived the heavenly tribulation, they would be able to make some adjustments to their appearance. Even a peerlessly ugly woman like Mother Saltless, which could become a few times more beautiful than Lady Shishir after being tempered by a few heavenly tribulations. Not to mention that Goddess Miao Xian was an existence that possessed an overall strength of at least gold immortal realm in Wuqi's perception. At that time, Goddess Miao Xian was indeed a peerless beauty. She was outstanding in talent, knowledge, and means. Otherwise, how could she become Patriarch Miaoying's intimate disciple? But, there were also grudges and disputes between primordial immortals, big and small. For example, Patriarch Miaoying had an enemy that she had since she was a cultivator. It was when she had just stepped onto the path of immortal cultivation, and before Jin Dan could be formed. As a result, the pair of enemies had been fighting each other for their entire lives, and even after they had become primordial immortals, they were still fighting each other. It was during one of the duels that Goddess Miao Xian became the sacrificial victim. When primordial immortals fought with each other, it was impossible for them to draw out flying swords and thunder flames, sweating profusely like ordinary heaven immortals. When primordial immortals fought with each other, it was like the spring breeze and the rain, silently and soundlessly. Goddess Miao Xian was struck by Patriarch Miaoying's enemy with a soundless, invisible, and traceless evil shape curse. In just a short span of 100 years, she had turned from an intelligent and beautiful woman into an extremely ugly woman that was 100 times uglier than Mother Saltless Witch. Not only had her appearance changed, even her temperament had been affected. She used to be an extraordinarily talented woman, but now, her wisdom was even worse than ordinary people, and her means of doing things had become extremely clumsy. Most of the time, she acted based on her instinct, and no longer cared about the changes she had in the past. Wu Qi broke out in a cold sweat as he listened to the story. The means of a primordial immortal was truly unimaginable. How could a beautiful and intelligent woman be turned into such an ugly and stupid woman? Perhaps, this evil-shaped curse was 100 times more vicious than the dark Yin soul captivation. Wu Qi's eyes darted from side to side as he asked hastily, "So, Patriarch, why don't you think of a solution?" Miao Yu sighed lightly, shook her head, and said, "That man's cultivation base is not much different from Patriarch's, and the wicked shape curse is a unique curse that he painstakingly created. Although Patriarch possesses mighty magical powers and boundless divine abilities, she still can't dispel the curse." After a brief moment of silence, Miao Yu sighed and said, "The evil shape curse has fused closely with Goddess Miao Xian's body. When resolving it, a careless mistake could destroy both your immortal body and immortal soul, as well as the curse. It is not easy to resolve such a curse." Wu Qi's eyes darted back and forth. It seemed that the curse had fused with Goddess Miao Xian, and every cell in her body had been corroded by it. If one tried to resolve it with brute force, both sides would be destroyed easily. Under such circumstances, only by using some special natural treasures to gradually enhance a thread of innate Yin energy in Goddess Miao Xian's body could the curse be resolved. When it came to this, what could be more effective than the Ling Yi True Water? Countless thoughts flashed across Wu Qi's mind, and he could not help but reveal a smile. A large door appeared right in front of him. 4 men from the Longbow Kingdom, clad in heavy armors, were standing right in front of the door, their 8 big eyes staring straight at Wu Qi. Miao Yu hastily pulled out a medallion and waved it at these Longbow men. "By Goddess Miao Yu's order, I'm here to bring the chief supervisor of the mine, Daoist Wu Wang, to the storehouse and pick 2 defensive items. Open the door now, no more delays." The heavy storehouse door opened slowly, and a sheet of rainbow light shot out from within. A faint clanging of metals rang out as Wu Qi followed Miao Yu into the storehouse. He immediately saw several hundred immortal items of various sizes hovering in midair. Every immortal item was brimming with energy and spirituality. On the top of the storeroom, there was a 36 feet long gold immortal talisman that stretched across the void, emitting a vast golden light that trapped these immortal items in midair. Miao Yu pointed at the immortal items and said with a smile, "These are the immortal items crafted by Goddess Miao Yu personally over the past 2 years." Supervisor Lu had captured some miners to mine the various minerals found in the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean. Thanks to Supervisor Lu's management skills, we have never thought of mining the minerals here. It was with this credit that Lu Buwei had managed to get in touch with Goddess Miao Xian. Wu Qi nodded silently. There were no gold immortal items in this storehouse. It was not hard to imagine that even if Goddess Miao Xian wanted to craft a gold immortal item, it would be impossible for her to do so in just 2 years. On the contrary, when she crafted an ordinary immortal item with the cultivation base of a gold immortal, it was like a heaven immortal crafting a magical treasure for a Jin Dan or nascent soul cultivator. With just a pinch of her fingers, she could craft an immortal item. That was why there were several hundred immortal items in this storehouse. After a brief moment of pondering, he used the identity of a cultivator from the Fiend League who was cultivating the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture, and chose a set of Enchanting Skulls flag, which was formed using 49 blood-red skulls, and a set of Myriad Spirit white bone armor, which was forged using countless tiny white bones mixed with tendons, skin, hair, and some other evil materials. One for offense and the other for defense, these 2 immortal items were just right for Wu Qi's current use. On top of that, the quality of both immortal items was pretty good. They were at least 18th tier immortal items, with impressive offensive and defensive strength. They were crafted by Goddess Miao Xian herself, and the item spirits inside were the souls of prehistoric beasts she had killed in the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, extracted and fused into the immortal items. Therefore, after learning the control technique from Miao Yu, it did not take Wu Qi much effort to completely refine both immortal items. After giving over 300 immortal items of various colors a fierce glance, Wu Qi smacked his lips and followed Miao Yu out of the storehouse. If there was a chance, he would never let go of these immortal items. However, it was a pity that the defensive formations outside the storehouse were similar to all the formations in Miaoying Palace. They were all strange formations that Wu Qi could not comprehend in a short period of time, and the difference in strength was too great. It would be very, very difficult to break them. Miao Yu brought Wu Qi all the way to the mine. Perhaps it was because it was rare for her to meet an opponent that she could chat with. Miao Yu kept telling Wu Qi many things about Miaoying Palace. Wu Qi learned more about the latent power of Miaoying Palace. Surprisingly, Patriarch Miaoying was the commander-in-chief of an immortal army of the Celestial Court, and was given the title of Nine Celestial Lord in the Celestial Court. She was a celestial lord who ruled over a starry sky, a celestial lord who ruled over 10,000 heavenly realms, and a celestial lord who ruled over 10,000 heavenly realms. While Miao Yu was introducing all the affairs in Miaoying Palace to Wu Qi complacently, all of a sudden, drums and trumpets sounded from both inside and outside of Miaoying Palace. As Goddess Miao Xian's voice echoed through the entire palace, "An honorable guest has arrived. Follow me to welcome him." "He, King Zhangqiu, you are here again." Wu Qi happened to follow Miao Yu out of Miaoying Palace's main entrance. He saw a middle-aged man standing before the entrance with his hands clasped behind his back. He was clad in a long black burlap robe, with a tall cypress crown on his head. He had a dull expression, a pair of dull eyes, and an aura of death emanating from him that made him look like a 10,000 years old zombie. When Wu Qi saw the man, he felt a chill run down his spine, and an aura of death came rushing at his face, nearly turning his corporeal body into ashes. The main entrance of Miaoying Palace opened, and Goddess Miao Xian walked out excitedly with a large group of disciples, guards, and serving ladies. Chapter 496. Inside the pitch-dark mine, only the clanking of oars could be heard. It sounded like the clanking of chains being shaken by ghost soldiers from the 18 levels of hell, echoing coldly in everyone's ears. All the cultivators who had their nascent divinity sealed by Wu Qi were working with all their might. Cart after cart of ores kept being transported out of the mine, sent to Miaoying Palace's storehouse by the Ikshas. The greenish light shone on Wu Qi's face, making his facial muscles twist and contort, making him look like a 10,000 years old zombie lying in a coffin. It was a very frightening sight. His upper body was bared, and his broken arm was wriggling slowly. Countless flesh sprouts were slowly growing back, forming new muscles, tendons, bones, blood vessels, and skin. The sword beam flashed. The corner of Wu Qi's mouth was twitching, and a cruel smile emerged on his face. The sword beam flashed. His arm flew high up into the sky, and blood sprayed and sprayed all over the ground. Wu Qi smiled coldly, while the faces of Daoist Qi, Daoist Min, and all the other immortals from Yuanhua sect kept flashing before his eyes. Right at the moment when the sword beam was about to cut through Wu Qi's skin, the 7 stealing heaven meridians in Wu Qi's arm rolled and rolled on its own, wrapping around the 5 innate nascent souls and taking away the enormous energies, flesh, and blood essence in the arm in just a blink of an eye, collapsing into a seed smaller than a sesame seed and retracting into his shoulder. What the sword beam brought away was an empty fleshly body, except for the shape of the arm. What was left behind were the magical 7 stealing heaven meridians and the 5 innate nascent souls. I still need to study the magical scroll of stealing. Quietly, Wu Qi exercised the evil cultivation technique found in the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture to regenerate his fleshly body. Quietly, he felt the seed formed from the collapse of the 7 stealing heaven meridians slowly stretch out and grow in his new arm. Wrapped in the enormous innate energies and the 5 innate nascent souls, the perfectly intact 7 stealing heaven meridians opened up a unique meridian channel in his new arm. The 7 stealing heaven meridians was an existence that was completely different from the meridian system of ordinary people. It traveled through Wu Qi's arm, bringing him a burning pain. However, the pain was very real, and filled him with strength. It made Wu Qi sweat from head to toe, but he was filled with joy. A powerful force was rolling and traveling in his arm. Once again, Wu Qi's spirit had fused into the state of enlightenment, a state where he felt he had become one with the heaven and earth. Before his eyes, a faint purple mist was rising from the ground, gently occupying the entire space. He was very familiar with the purple mist, as he had seen it at the side of the main road on the grassland where he bumped into the hunchbacked old man. Wu Qi's heart leaped with a thought. Joyfully, he called out to the purple mists, inviting them to come into his body. The purple qi passed through Wu Qi's body and fused into his flesh and blood. All of a sudden, the regenerating arm sped up, and along with a series of hissing noises, the broken arm was restored to its original state. The 7 stealing heaven meridians had completely expanded in his arm, just like the previous arm. A powerful innate true energy was rolling and flowing in his arm, and a hidden force was faintly spreading around Wu Qi's body. What the hell is this thing? Wu Qi growled in a low voice and suddenly stretched both of his hands forward. 2 invisible whirlpools emerged from his palms. Just like how he plundered the essence, blood and qi of other cultivators, the purple qi also slowly flowed into his body. It was heavy, very heavy, and its texture was unusually dense. If the essence, blood and qi of other cultivators were like a cloud, they could be easily absorbed by Wu Qi. But this purple qi was as heavy as mercury that had been compressed 100 times. No matter how hard Wu Qi tried to absorb it, the purple qi was still not affected by the suction force. Just like before, the purple qi was drifting and spreading in all directions. Only when it passed through Wu Qi's body, did a part of it slowly fuse into his body. Wu Qi did not believe it. He tried his best to absorb the purple qi, and a sharp sound of air rippling could be heard coming from his palms. 2 black whirlpools that could be seen with naked eyes appeared on his palms. Even so, the purple qi was still unaffected. Only a very small amount of purple qi flowed into his body, and nothing else changed. It was this tiny amount of purple qi that had fused into Wu Qi's palms that made Wu Qi's arm strength skyrocket. In just a quarter of an hour, Wu Qi's arms were burning hot, and the strength of his arms had skyrocketed by more than 70%, far exceeding the current strength of his body. Shocked and overjoyed, Wu Qi's mind abruptly left the state of enlightenment. Once he left the state of enlightenment, where he seemed to know nothing, yet also seemed to know everything, Wu Qi could no longer sense the existence of the purple qi even after activating the mystic eyes of universe. His body could no longer absorb even a tiny bit of purple qi. Strange, what exactly is this thing? He glanced around and found that this place was filled with nether ocean dark gold copper deposits. All the natural energies had been absorbed by the ores, leaving not even a tiny bit of natural energy. However, this strange purple qi ignored the nether ocean dark gold copper deposits, and continued to fill the surrounding void. However, no ordinary cultivators could sense its existence. If only he could use this purple qi like how he used the natural energies. Wu Qi's heart was surging with a surge of excitement that he could not suppress. He pressed his palm against the ground, and soundlessly left a 3-inch deep palm print on the nether ocean dark gold copper ores, which were 100 times tougher than pig iron. Without using any divine ability or magical power, he had reached such a level purely with the strength of his fleshly body. What exactly is this purple mist? Wu Qi knitted his brows into a tight frown and gave the surroundings a puzzled look. Still, the mystic eyes of universe could not detect the existence of the purple qi, and when he scanned the void with his divine will, he found nothing. Even a speck of dust hovering in the air could not hide from Wu Qi's divine will. But, apart from the dust in the air, he found nothing. Wu Qi angrily slapped the ground a few times, shaking his head as he thought of King Zhangqiu, whom he met at the entrance of Miaoying Palace yesterday. This King Zhangqiu gave Wu Qi a very bad feeling. He was dull, ancient, and clumsy, like an old stone slab that had been placed on the top of a mountain for several tens of thousands of years, giving off a strange feeling that could not be put into words. Wu Qi sensed danger from him. This man was very dangerous. Wu Qi's intuition told him that he would bring trouble to himself and many others. It would not be a small trouble. In fact, it would be a huge trouble, and many people would be dragged into it. King Zhangqiu. Was this man a king? The celestial court only had titles like Heavenly King. King Zhangqiu sounded like a noble title given by the imperial court of Diyu. He did not sense the energy ripples of an ordinary cultivator. Most likely, he was practicing the body cultivation technique of Diyu, combined with the peculiar divine ability of beast soul attachment. What was a noble title of Diyu doing here in Miaoying Palace? Furthermore, he was goddess Miao Xian's honored guest. A king of the human race was the honored guest of a primordial immortal, who had the title of celestial lord in the celestial court. Why did it sound so strange? While Wu Qi was pondering over King Zhangqiu's background and his relationship with Miaoying Palace, a baffling cultivation technique suddenly appeared in his spiritual ocean, the foundation part of true body of heaven and earth scripture. Wu Qi was taken aback. There was absolutely no record of this cultivation technique in the scroll of stealing, and it just appeared in his spiritual ocean out of nowhere. He glanced around in terror, but the thick and pitch-black walls of the mine had blocked his vision. Even though he had used the mystic eyes of universe to peer through the ore to a distance of several hundred miles, he still could not find anything unusual. Immediately after that, a profound rune appeared in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. Together with the short cultivation technique of over 100 characters, and the rune of meditating and observing, it was the complete essence of the foundation part of true body of heaven and earth scripture. Wu Qi was drenched in sweat as he sat on the hassock with a blank expression, unable to make a sound. He was being targeted by some almighty expert. Without a doubt, he was being targeted by someone. But, what was this man trying to do? What was his intention in giving him this foundation part of true body of heaven and earth scripture? Clenching his jaws, Wu Qi cursed under his breath as he glanced around in panic. In for a penny, in for a pound, in for a pound. His enormous divine will condensed into the shape of the rune in his spiritual ocean, and he devoted all his mind into it. After that, he took a deep breath and began to silently recall the energy circulation technique with just over 100 characters. He took a deep breath, then exhaled. His breath came in waves, but never stopped. There was no core in his body, and it was spreading out like a gas, fusing with the surrounding void. As soon as the rune took shape in his spiritual ocean, a stream of light flashed, and it began to spin rapidly like a whirlpool. A tremendous suction force rushed out from every single one of Wu Qi's cells. Gradually, a faint purple mist began to gather around him, forming a rune formation underneath his body that looked exactly the same as the rune in his spiritual ocean. It measured several tens of feet in diameter. The purple mist, which could only be seen by Wu Qi in the state of Tao enlightenment, but could not be used no matter how hard he tried, flowed into Wu Qi's body like a thawed stream of water. The strength of his fleshly body skyrocketed, and every cell in his body was being strengthened. A crisp sound of dragon scales breaking rang out from within his body. The dragon body formed by cultivating the dragon transformation script was shattered, and the dragon transformation script was easily destroyed by the purple mist. The purple mist occupied every cell in Wu Qi's body, and began to transform Wu Qi's body in a bizarre way that could not be described with words. When the dragon transformation script was destroyed, Wu Qi's fleshly body nearly disintegrated, and the strength of his fleshly body dropped from the realm of 35th tier heaven immortal to the realm of an ordinary mortal. However, the purple energy stabilized Wu Qi's body. In the blink of an eye, his body's strength had reached the level of a heaven immortal. 2 hours later, his body's strength had returned to the level of a heaven immortal. His muscles were rolling and wriggling. On the basis of the destroyed dragon transformation script, the purple energy had transformed and strengthened Wu Qi's fleshly body. Suddenly, the strength of his fleshly body approached that of a 33rd tier heaven immortal who specialized in body tempering. A terrifying, pure physical force filled Wu Qi's body. He even had the illusion that he could shatter a star with a single punch. Out of nowhere, a new cultivation technique appeared in Wu Qi's sea of consciousness and was directly imprinted in the depths of his soul. True Body of Heaven and Earth Scripture Skin Tempering Chapter. True Body of Heaven and Earth Technique, Flesh Tempering Chapter. True Body of Heaven and Earth Technique, Bone Forging Chapter. True Body of Heaven and Earth Technique, Blood Change Chapter. True Body of Heaven and Earth Technique, Tendon Transformation Chapter. True Body of Heaven and Earth Technique, Marrow Cleansing Chapter. Each cultivation method corresponded to several or even dozens of different runes. And the last one that appeared in Wu Qi's Sea of Consciousness was the True Body of Heaven and Earth Technique, Pangu's Primordial Chaos Chapter. Wu Qi was struck with great shock. Cold sweat broke out from all over his body as he woke up from the bizarre enlightenment. His mind was filled with a myriad of thoughts. Vaguely, Wu Qi knew who he had offended. A blind old man, a hunchbacked old man, and an old man who was missing a leg. Their images suddenly flashed before Wu Qi's eyes. Chapter 497. Drenched in sweat, Wu Qi sprung to his feet and looked around in panic. He was the only one in the room, and neither the mystic eyes of universe nor his divine sense could detect the existence of anyone else. Wu Qi pushed open the heavy stone door and rushed into the mine. Inside the pitch-black mine, several thousand cultivators were still working hard. Bored to death, yikshaws squatted on the stalagmites around them. Some were gambling, some were drinking, and some were simply engaged in shadowy activities in shadowy corners. There were no eyesores, none at all. At the entrance of the mine, a group of ferocious yikshaws pushed a dozen pale-faced itinerant cultivators into the mine. Their faces were swollen and bruised, and they seemed to have suffered a lot. The yikshaws punched and kicked them, driving them into the mine. Obviously, they were a group of unlucky newcomers, who were captured alive by the yikshaws and sent here to work as coolies. How could they be captured alive by the yikshaws, who could transmit these cultivation techniques into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean? Wu Qi looked around in terror, then clenched his teeth and walked back into the mine where he lived, slamming the stone door behind him. Sitting cross-legged in the same spot, with all his mind focused on his spiritual ocean, Wu Qi tried his best to ask again and again with his divine sense, "Who are you?" In his vast and boundless spiritual space, a loud voice began to echo, "Who are you? Who are you? Who are you?" After a full 2 hours, an old voice suddenly rang out in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, "I am Cheong Chan." With a quick thought, Wu Qi shouted in his spiritual ocean, "Lu Chan'er's grandfather? Eunuch Chan." The old voice laughed and said, "Yes, little friend, you still remember me. Very good." Wu Qi remained silent for a long time. After a long while, Wu Qi asked, "What is the true body of heaven and earth scripture?" Cheong Chan laughed and said, "Du is one of the main cultivation methods of the human race. It can be considered a very good cultivation method. According to the legend, if one cultivates to the last part of the Pan Gu immemorial scripture, if he is lucky enough and talented enough, he can grow his Pan Gu body and become as powerful as Saint Pan Gu. There's no such thing as a free lunch in the world. Tell me, why did you find me?" Wu Qi's question was very straightforward. At the thought of being able to cultivate the cultivation technique of the legendary Saint Pan Gu, Wu Qi's scalp went numb. This kind of cultivation method, who would impart it to others for no reason? Oh. Pondering for a short while, Cheong Chan laughed and said, "Don't be afraid, don't panic. Except for the one specially cultivated by the royal family of Du, the other few cultivation methods of the human race are not top secrets. For example, that little girl in Miaoying Palace knows all the cultivation methods of the true body of heaven and earth scripture, but she will never cultivate it." Wu Qi lightly pressed his fist against the ground, leaving a foot-deep imprint on the ground. Then, he asked, "Why can't I cultivate such an exquisite cultivation technique?" Reaching the level of Pan Gu is a level that only the ancient saints who created the world could reach. Who would give up cultivating such a cultivation method? After another moment of silence, Cheong Chan's voice rang out in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, "There is nothing strange about it. Cultivating with the cultivation methods of the human race will gradually change their bodies, and immortals will gradually turn back into human beings. But, human beings will grow old, get sick, and die. Wu Qi didn't know what to say. After a long while, he asked with a wry smile, "Is Saint Pangu going to die?" Cheong Chan answered matter-of-factly, "If Saint Pangu is not going to die, where did Pangu continent come from?" Pangu continent is transformed from Saint Pangu's body, and this world was created by him with all his divine power before he died. We human beings have inherited part of his bloodline, and that's why we have complied with the heavenly Tao of this world and become the rulers of this world. Wu Qi was struck with a sudden realization, as he suddenly understood the origin of the harsh heavenly punishment given to immortal cultivators by the heaven and earth. Saint Pangu was the ancestor of the human race, and the cultivation of immortals was a process of gradually breaking away from the human race. In a word, what immortals had done had completely violated the laws of heaven and earth set by Saint Pangu, who created this world. Therefore, when an immortal's cultivation improved, the heavenly punishment would fall once. The higher an immortal's cultivation base was, the more severe the heavenly punishment would be. Immortals were the cancer cells of this world, and the laws of heaven and earth were the immune system of this world. After a long silence, Wu Qi still wanted to ask something, but Cheong Chan did not give him the chance. The old voice rang in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean, making Wu Qi feel as if he had been struck by a thunderbolt, and he could not muster any strength. You don't need to know too much. With your current cultivation base, you can't know too much. In short, the blind old man was the first to take a fancy to you, the hunchback was the second, and I was the third. Your character is not bad, and you can be considered a useful person. Therefore, after a discussion, the three of them taught you the true body of heaven and earth scripture. The rest is up to you. Continue to cultivate. The true body of heaven and earth scripture is useless to you. Although you can become immortal, you can be killed at any time. If you cultivate the true body of heaven and earth scripture, you may be able to fight against a gold immortal in just a few decades. If you can fuse with a good beast soul, you can also live a long life. Besides, human cultivators do have a chance of survival, ha ha ha. Cheong Chan laughed and said, "There's no need to tell you too much about these things now. Don't worry, we won't keep an eye on you at all times. Just follow your heart and do what you want it to be. You are not the first person to inherit the true body of heaven and earth scripture, nor will you be the last. You are just one of the candidates we selected. Your future, life and death, fortune and misfortune, all depends on your choice." Wu Qi shook his head repeatedly and shouted, "You have to give me an explanation. Why did you choose me? What did you choose me for?" Cheong Chan's voice gradually dissipated, and his laughter came from afar. "With your current strength, do you need so much explanation? In short, you have been chosen, and you have been chosen. Do what you want to do, that's your business. If you don't reach a certain level, you will never see us again." In the end, there was only a faint echo in Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. Remember, don't let others know about this. If those immortals know that you have inherited the true body of heaven and earth scripture, even if you are still an immortal cultivator, they will kill you in an instant. Remember this. Ha! Wu Qi opened his mouth. A curse was already at the tip of his tongue, but he could not utter it no matter how hard he tried. Patriarch Miaoing was crafting her magical treasure at the bottom of the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean. For an existence of primordial immortal realm, the mine where Wu Qi was hiding was right next to her nose, and she would know every single move he made. However, Cheong Chan had inherited Wu Qi's true body of heaven and earth scripture with a bizarre method, and even whispered to Wu Qi for a long time, yet Patriarch Miaoing did not show any reaction. This proved that his cultivation base was far stronger than hers. It was fun to curse people, but if Cheong Chan was still nearby and heard his curses, it would not be fun anymore. With a wry smile, Wu Qi threw his head back and breathed out a long sigh. Once again, he felt a deep sense of helplessness. Perhaps in the eyes of Cheong Chan and the others, he was even smaller than an ant. With his current overall strength, he indeed did not have the right to know anything. But, he would not let these almighty experts do whatever they wanted. No matter what they wanted to do, Wu Qi would have to escape from their control. Once he obtained the innate yang energy and formed the innate chaotic spirit body, he would be able to escape from the control of the rules of heaven and earth, and make it difficult for these almighty experts to control his every move. Clenching his jaw, Wu Qi made up his mind. He had to speed things up. The true body of heaven and earth scripture was a good thing. Vaguely, Wu Qi saw the hope of breaking the restrictive spell of the dark yin soul captivation. Thank you for this generous gift. When ordinary immortal cultivators cultivate the true body of heaven and earth scripture, they will gradually turn into mortals, and that is because there is something wrong with their cultivation technique. But for me, he. A bright gleam shone from Wu Qi's eyes. Clenching his jaw, he said, as long as I can form the chaotic spirit body, it will be able to accommodate everything, and I will be able to cultivate any cultivation technique under the heaven. Internally, I am cultivating the 7 foundation elevating technique and various divine abilities, and externally, I will be able to cultivate the true body of heaven and earth. This is a great advantage for me. In those years, even the shadowy figure who inherited Wu Qi's scroll of stealing could not obtain the body cultivation technique of the human race, because at that time, human beings were weak and insignificant, and there was no such cultivation technique. But today, Cheong Chan had personally given this true body of heaven and earth scripture to Wu Qi. It was truly a case of one can wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching, only to find it by chance. Grinning coldly, Wu Qi sat down cross-legged on the ground. No matter where you go, I will not budge an inch. No matter what tricks you have up your sleeves, I will just do whatever I want. Even if you have the divine ability to create the world, what can you do to me? With a faint grin on his face, Wu Qi immersed his mind into his body. Billowing fiend aura wheeled around him, and while he pretended to be cultivating painstakingly, his mind had already contacted the celestial fiend puppet clone in the City Lord Mansion of Anhe City. Sitting cross-legged in the great hall of the City Lord Mansion and munching on a few pieces of rare metals, the puppet's eyes narrowed abruptly. A divine gleam spread out from his eyes as he cried out in a deep voice, "Somebody, go to the backyard and invite Palace Master here for a discussion. He, no matter what Palace Master is doing, tell him that I have something great to introduce to him." A few cultivators who had submitted to Euphoria Heavenly Palace standing in front of the hall answered respectfully. One of them, a middle-aged man, quickly stepped onto a cloud and flew straight to the backyard. Not long after that, the layer of pink Buddhist light in the backyard gradually dissipated. Lao Ai, with his upper body bared and his lower body clad only in a thin pair of underpants, swaggered out from the back hall with a pair of large breasts on his back. What's the matter? I'm having an exchange with fellow Taoist Three Flame. Don't disturb me. With a wave of his hand, a beam of Buddhist light sprinkled out and sealed off the void around the great hall, preventing the cultivators who were waiting outside from eavesdropping on their conversation. Pointing at the puppet, Lao Ai said with a cold grin, "Why are you looking for me, you metal lump? You." The divine gleam in the puppet's eyes shone to a depth of 1 foot, while Wu Qi's voice was heard coming from inside his body, "Prince of Changxin, it's me." Lao Ai was taken aback. Hastily, he put on an obsequious smile and said, "Oh, it's you. What's the matter?" The puppet smiled faintly and said in a deep voice, "I have something great to introduce to you." Lao Ai's eyes lit up. Chapter 498. Sitting on a large chair with his legs crossed, Wu Qi looked at Lao Ai and kept smiling. Lao Ai felt uneasy when he saw Wu Qi's smile. Baring his teeth, he gave himself a quick glance, but did not find anything wrong with him. Only then did he glare at Wu Qi and snapped, "What are you laughing at? What's so funny? Now that I've killed Reverend Sanlo, I'm now the master of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Befriending those female cultivators is what the master of Euphoria Heavenly Palace should do." Wu Qi smiled and straightened his face. Lightly patting his body, he said in a deep voice, "From today onwards, I'll replace you as the master of Euphoria Heavenly Palace with this clone of mine. You, and Madman Shui, both of you have to come and help me. Lao Ai frowned and asked in a deep voice, you're in trouble. Nodding his head seriously, Wu Qi said sincerely, I don't have the ability to solve this problem, but if it is you, I'm sure you will be able to help me solve it quickly. In addition, I met an old friend, Lu Buwei, who is also here. Lu Buwei. Lao Ai's long hair suddenly stood up as he sprung to his feet, glaring at Wu Qi as he growled, that old fool is here too. Wu Qi did not answer him. He just kept staring at Lao Ai. Lao Ai took a deep breath and said with a stern voice, does your trouble have something to do with Lu Buwei? Nodding lightly, Wu Qi smiled and said, if you can solve that trouble, you can kill Lu Buwei with a borrowed knife. Lao Ai's eyes were glistening with tears. Clenching his jaws, he said, in that case, I'll bring Madman Shui to help you. Lu Buwei, oh Lu Buwei, you set me up years ago, making me. The death of my 2 sons was done by Ying Zheng. But, don't tell me it has nothing to do with you. I was loyal and devoted to you in the past, but you set me up for your own misfortune. Wu Qi looked at Lao Ai, whose eyes were filled with tears, without saying a word. Lao Ai's emotional words were very novel to Wu Qi. Combined with some of the historical records that he had read, these words sounded very interesting. Lao Ai let out a few strange laughs, then said in a deep voice, this is not great Yen. Without Yen Dan's suppression, I'll have to fight Lu Buwei to the death. Wu Qi, you can't slack off. You have to help me kill Lu Buwei wholeheartedly. As long as you can kill him, I don't want any treasures on him. Everything is yours. Wu Qi nodded and said, all right, as long as you can help me solve the trouble, killing a Lu Buwei is nothing to me. Lao Ai fixed his eyes on Wu Qi, and Wu Qi stared back at him. Lao Ai, the peerless evil man, had tears in his eyes, while Wu Qi's celestial fiend puppet had a cold gleam flashing in his eyes. For a moment, it was as if their roles had been swapped, and it was as if Wu Qi had turned into a ruthless and ferocious monster. Lao Ai let out a strange laugh, then waved his hand and put on a brocade robe. He returned to his seat and said coolly, do you want to hear my story? Even Yen Dan will not tell you about these things. Moreover, he will never be able to explain the entanglement of cause and effect. Apart from us, who are the parties involved, no one can explain the grudge between us. Wu Qi laughed and said, do you still have the mood to talk about this now? After a moment of silence, Lao Ai nodded and said, I suddenly want to say something. But, how can I tell them about this? Them? Wu Qi knew that the them mentioned by Lao Ai was referring to Yen Dan, Ying Zheng, Tian Dan, and the others who came from the same place and time as him. With Lao Ai's proud and arrogant character, how could he tell these things to these old acquaintances? Lao Ai would never allow himself to show weakness in front of his old acquaintances. He could shed tears in front of Wu Qi, but he would never show weakness in front of Yen Dan and the others. The story was very simple, just like the records in the history books that Lu Xiaobai had read. But, some of the details were much more detailed than those in the history books. Lao Ai was just a right-hand man of Lu Buwei. In order to earn a living, a bowl of wine to drink, and a woman to warm his bed, he sought refuge with Lu Buwei and became his right-hand man. Because of his extraordinary innate talent, he was sent to the palace by Lu Buwei and given to Ying Zheng's mother as a gigolo. For the first time in my life, I have fallen in love with a woman. Lao Ai hid his hands in his sleeves. At this moment, all the evil aura around him was gone. He stared at Wu Qi with a frank look in his eyes, like an old teacher who was lecturing about the rise and fall of a dynasty in a class. For the first time in my life, I have given birth to a child with a woman. Lao Ai looked up, and 2 lines of tears evaporated on his face. His face was calm, simple and solemn, like an old locust tree that had weathered the wind and rain for a long time. He said lightly, everything could have been fine. I doted on the woman I loved the most in the harem, and also the woman who loved me the most. I, Lu Bue, had the sole power in the imperial court, and I could do whatever I wanted. I didn't fight for it, and I didn't fight for it. I just wanted to live in the harem with my woman and my child. Wu Qi clapped his hands lightly and said, "Good idea," but Lao Ai narrowed his eyes and stared at Wu Qi with a vicious gleam in his eyes. But Lu Bue and Ing Zheng were fighting for power. He regarded me as the best stone to explore the way, the best knife to attract Ing Zheng's attention. Therefore, I rebelled, and Ing Zheng rehabilitated me. I was killed, my woman was imprisoned, and 2 of my children were killed by Ing Zheng. Lao Ai gave a strange smile and said in a low voice, "I can understand Ing Zheng. He is the king of Daqin, and he can't tolerate his mother giving birth to a child with me, a fake eunuch. But I can't tolerate Lu Bue's betrayal. I've been loyal to him, and I've always obeyed his orders in the harem, never disobeying him. He kicked me away like a crippled old dog, killed my children, and made my woman suffer. Indeed, it is necessary for you to settle the score with him." Wu Qi sighed and said, "Lu Bue is very favored in Miaoying Palace now, and you are going to fight for his favor. I've already come up with a full plan. As long as you show a little of your talent in seducing women, you will have a great chance of succeeding." Lao Ai looked at Wu Qi and laughed. "You want me to seduce a woman? That's easy. She is a gold immortal," Wu Qi said, looking at Lao Ai. Lao Ai, who was grinning from ear to ear, froze abruptly. He stared at Wu Qi in shock and cried out, "What? A gold immortal?" Nodding seriously, Wu Qi said, "She is a gold immortal, and Miaoying Palace is a power of the Fiend League. She is a saint fiend immortal of gold immortal realm. If you make her unhappy, I'm afraid she will kill you right away." The corner of Wu Qi's mouth twitched slightly as he said in a deep voice, "Immortals of the Fiend League have no eyes when killing people. If they are unhappy, it's not a big deal for them to kill a few people." Lao Ai hesitated. He frowned and pondered for a long while, then clenched his teeth and nodded. A gold immortal is also a woman. Gradually, Lao Ai regained his confidence and courage. "As long as she is a woman, there is nothing I can't take down. Lu Bue actually has a gold immortal on his side. If that's the case, I'll have to ruin his plan. Otherwise, if he gets something from that gold immortal, I won't be able to kill him." Wu Qi nodded slowly and said in a deep voice, "Patriarch Miao Ying is a primordial immortal. When you are seducing goddess Miao Xian, you have to make sure to please Patriarch Miao Ying. If you can make Patriarch Miao Ying also. Forget it, that's basically impossible. A primordial immortal will never be moved by lust." Lao Ai opened his mouth, feeling unconvinced. He wanted to boast that he could even seduce a primordial immortal. But he did not have the courage and the cheek to say it. The challenge from a gold immortal was strong enough, let alone a primordial immortal. They were existences that were not human beings. Only the heavens knew if they still retained their lust. Staring at Lao Ai, who had a strange expression on his face, Wu Qi said coolly, "Perhaps a primordial immortal can undo the restrictive spell in your nascent divinity." Lao Ai's body tensed up abruptly. He sprung to his feet, panting heavily as he fixed his eyes on Wu Qi. Without looking at Lao Ai, Wu Qi smiled faintly and said, "Maybe I can undo it, maybe I can't. Anyway, I'll give it a try. There's always hope." Lao Ai took a deep breath, nodded his head vigorously, and clenched his jaws tightly. After a brief discussion with Lao Ai in a low voice, Lao Ai let out a few loud cries. Then, Supremacy 3 Flame swaggered out from the back hall, bringing Madman Shui with him. After the discussion was done, the celestial fiend puppet constructed a small teleportation formation in the hall, and Lao Ai strode into it with Madman Shui. At the same time, the connection between Wu Qi and the puppet was cut off, and the divine gleam in the puppet's eyes returned to its primal state. In a barren mountain about 1 million miles away from the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean, a bright beam shot out from under the ground, and a small teleportation formation disk revealed itself. Before long, Lao Ai and Madman Shui walked out of the formation. The master and disciple gave the scenery in the distance a brief glance, then buried the teleportation formation disc properly. Only then did they step on their flying swords and fly towards the dark abyss while laughing and joking merrily. Cautiously, the master and disciple approached the great ocean of the Northern Ocean. Just as Wu Qi expected, a few patrolling yikshaws suddenly rushed out from the ocean, tied the master and disciple up with ropes condensed from seawater, and dragged them straight into the dark abyss. An hour later, Wu Qi met Lao Ai and his disciple in the mine. With a cold face, Wu Qi came before Lao Ai and Madman Shui, snatching a storage bracelet worn on Lao Ai's wrist. Inside the bracelet were some energy stones and medicinal ingredients that Lao Ai brought for Wu Qi. Wu Qi, who was already extremely poor, finally had some wealth. After that, Lao Ai and Madman Shui were dragged into the mine by the yikshaws, adding 2 more coolies to the mine. 2 days later, Lao Ai's mocking voice was suddenly heard coming out from the mine. "Cowards! Are you still men? Ha ha ha, I don't even need to use my hands to push this or cart, and I can make it roll all over the ground with just this precious leg of mine. Yet, you can't even move it." Very soon, cries of surprise rang out from the mine. 10 fully loaded ore carts were lined up in a row. Lao Ai, with his lower body exposed, was using his precious leg to push the 10 ore carts against his body. Step by step, he walked up the steepest part of the mine path, leisurely and carefreely. The male cultivators' faces turned pale, while the female cultivators' eyes shone with a strange gleam. The straightforward and barbaric yikshaws looked at each other, then covered their lower bodies with their hands, feeling ashamed of their inferiority. Wu Qi turned to look at Lao Ai, who was throwing his head back and shouting complacently, and said coolly, "Somebody, ask Senior Miao Yu to come here. I have an important matter to discuss with Fairy." One of the yikshaws stared blankly at Lao Ai for a moment, then hastily ran out. Chapter 499. Goddess Miao Xian tilted her head to one side, sneaking glances at the figure with the corner of her eyes. Her expression was complicated, and she could not tell if she was sad or happy. She was shrouded in an aura that was filled with memories and bitterness, while her long tongue was licking the corner of her lips from time to time. Goddess Miao Xian and King Zhangqiu were sitting on 2 cloud beds on either side of the dais. Next to Goddess Miao Xian were Miao Feng and a dozen other enchanting and beautiful girls, while behind King Zhangqiu were a dozen heavily armored soldiers, their faces covered by thick metal masks, and even their eyes were covered with black transparent crystals. Miao Yu did not say a word, but just covered her mouth with her hand and giggled. At that very moment, a clump of fiend aura towered up into the sky from beneath Miaoying Palace, causing the entire place to shake violently. Everyone's attention was attracted by it. For a moment, the void froze like rubber, and everyone was trapped. Their eyes could not see, their ears could not hear, and all their senses were sealed within their bodies. King Zhangqiu, on the other hand, did not say a single word. The man clad in a crimson brocade robe, exuding an alluring charm that made one want to get close to him, was he not Lord Longyang of Great Wei? Wu Qi's ears twitched slightly, but he could no longer hear anything that was happening in the cave. He gave the stone door a glare with the mystic eyes of universe, and immediately, a few ferocious-looking fiends swooped over, looking as if they were going straight into Wu Qi's spiritual ocean. Not daring to be careless, Wu Qi quickly retracted the mystic eyes of universe and took a few steps back. Lu Buwei raised his head abruptly and saw Lao Ai and Lord Longyang. Even though he was a wily old fox, the muscles on his face still twitched violently. Miao Yu, on the other hand, was limp, clinging to Lao Ai's body like a deep-fried dough stick soaked in water. Her legs were not walking, but floating on the ground. She was moaning weakly, and her pink face was filled with joy and satisfaction. She was moaning weakly as she gently stroked Lao Ai's muscular chest with her little hand and said, "You are indeed a good man. Wu Wang, you can take the credit. Come, follow me to meet Goddess." Wu Qi pointed at Lao Ai and said smilingly, "Why don't we ask him to come down and talk to Senior himself?" Hey Mo let out a long sigh, shook his head and said, I didn't expect that I would be captured alive and brought to this place before I found anything. I'm really ashamed. Wu Qi and Lao Ai's footsteps came to an abrupt halt, and they nearly screamed out loud. Kuroto looked left and right, and an evil smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He said in a low voice, Madman, just you wait. Master will go eat a piece of meat first. Hee, when the time comes, there will be soup for you to try. Go back and wait. If there's anything, we'll talk about it after Patriarch comes out of seclusion and has a discussion with King Zhangqiu. Lao Ai bowed at Goddess Miao Xian with a smile on his face. His heart was bleeding, and he wished he could draw out his flying sword and hack at Wu Qi. This is the appearance of your so-called gold immortal. Even if she was a primordial unity golden immortal, Lao Ai would have to muster up his courage to seduce her. Although Lao Ai was lascivious by nature, he did not sleep with every woman he saw. He was also very picky and particular about taste. After fighting for 1 day and 1 night, Miaoyu did not even have the strength to fly on her flying sword. Lao Ai simply carried her in his arms, and Wu Qi led the way, bringing Lao Ai out of the mine and flying towards the main entrance of Miaoying Palace. With the medallion produced by Miaoyu, the three of them entered Miaoying Palace without a hitch, and went straight to the tallest and most majestic palace in the center of the palace. This person is indeed extraordinarily brave. Wu Qi understood what she meant. He chuckled, spun and walked out of the cave, and closed the stone door behind him. A sheet of dark light flashed across the stone door, as a few bizarre fiend runes flickered on it. Miaoyu had exercised a fiend technique and sealed the cave with a restrictive spell. Happily, Lao Ai pulled up his pants and sprung up into the sky, flying towards the mine where Wu Qi lived. Wu Qi casually crooked his finger, unleashing a sharp energy that smashed viciously onto Lao Ai's body. It startled Lao Ai, and he hastily turned to look over his shoulder. Wu Qi nodded and crooked his finger at Lao Ai. After that, he spun without saying a word and extended his hand to greet the guest, bringing Miaoyu into the mine where Wu Qi lived. Standing quietly before the cave, Wu Qi subconsciously fixed his eyes on a tiny dot on the top of the cave. He stood there for 1 day and 1 night. Madman Shui licked his lips covetously and scolded under his breath, Master, you are going to do it yourself. How can there be any soup for your disciple? Upon hearing the footsteps of the crowd, Goddess Miao Xian, King Zhangqiu, and Duke of Longyang turned to look at the same time. Wu Qi gave Duke of Longyang a fierce look, then quickly turned to look at King Zhangqiu. A strange gleam shone in Miaoyu's eyes, and a hot, seductive air suddenly spread from her slender body. Miaoyu, who was already as charming as water, now had her eyes watery. Even a blind man could see her amorous feelings. Miaoyu rolled her eyes, carefully glanced around, and slowly nodded. Lao Ai stuck out his chest and said with great pride, What I'm cultivating is the orthodox Buddhist cultivation technique, the joyous Zen technique. He slapped his lower body, narrowed his eyes, and smiled at Miaoyu, whose face was filled with seduction. I'm not bragging, but this treasure of mine has never been defeated. The man was wearing a tall crown carved from rubies, and a few red spirit jades were inlaid into it, emanating a faint warmth. From time to time, vague illusions of white lotus flowers could be vaguely seen hovering around him, making him look like a figure plucked out of a painting. Suddenly, the stone door opened with a creak. Lao Ai, with his face glowing, walked out with a smile, one arm wrapped around Miaoyu's waist. Lao Ai was still walking with a majestic gait. His spirit, energy, and spirit were brimming, and his cultivation base seemed to have skyrocketed. The smile on Duke of Longyang's face vanished, and he gave Lao Ai a quick glance. Miaoyu smiled pleasantly and said, Fellow Taoist, where are you from? Why are you here in the Northern Ocean? Miaoyu chuckled. While admiring Lao Ai's majestic figure as he walked step by step on the mine path, her eyes were running over his well-developed muscles like spring water. She smiled faintly and said, Miaoying Palace has a special cultivation technique for the outer sect disciples to cultivate. Although it is not very exquisite, it is still very rare. TSK, what is this man's name? Did you ask him where he came from? Excellent. If I can take Duke of Longyang under my wing like how I subdued Lao Ai, I will have Lao Ai to deal with women, and I will have Duke of Longyang to deal with men. Both of them will definitely become two great helpers for Wu Qi. No matter it was wisdom or resourcefulness, both of them were not lacking in either, and they were even more outstanding in their strategies. They were two great talents. Immediately, Wu Qi and Lao Ai understood what Duke of Longyang was trying to say. I don't know Lao Ai, and you better not know me either. It was clear that Duke of Longyang would not do anything to Lao Ai intentionally, but Lao Ai had better be sensible and not do anything against Duke of Longyang. Well water does not interfere with river water, and it would be best if everyone could live together. Nonsense. Miao Yu gave Wu Qi a sideways glance, giggled, and said, you better keep a close eye on this man. Why do you want to meet Fairy Maiden? While chatting with Wu Qi, Miao Yu kept her eyes glued to Lao Ai, especially when she was glancing at his lower body from time to time, intentionally or unintentionally. Lao Ai's face darkened abruptly as he fixed his eyes on Lu Bue. Duke of Longyang gave Wu Qi and Lao Ai a glance, then gave Lao Ai's face a fierce glare. Suddenly, he burst out laughing. His smile was like hundreds of flowers suddenly blooming in the mountains. The dimly lit hall was suddenly lit up. Little white lotuses bloomed around Duke of Longyang, and the bright white light enveloped the entire hall. Everyone felt their chests were lifted, and their bodies became brightly lit. From time to time, King Zhangqiu, who had a dull expression on his face, turned to look over his shoulder and whispered a few words to the lady. A lady clad in a bright red brocade robe, who had an enchanting and beautiful appearance, was sitting quietly right next to King Zhangqiu, maintaining an ambiguous distance of about 1 foot away from him. This space of about a foot was too far for a lover, and too close for a friend. It was precisely a distance between a lover and a friend, an ambiguous and limitless distance. Miao Yu gave Wu Qi a look, giggled, and said, well, this is your fate. What technique are you practicing? The sound of footsteps rang out, as Lu Bue hurried out from the back of the hall with a group of guards and serving ladies. Goddess, he said in a loud voice, I've prepared everything. Once Patriarch comes out from his secluded cultivation, everything will be ready. Euphoria Heavenly Palace, Euphoria Heavenly Palace. Only with the protection of these two can we enjoy the true, supreme happiness. In the cave where Wu Qi lived, Miao Yu was sitting cross-legged on a stone couch, fixing her eyes on Lao Ai. Lao Ai had a strong body, a handsome face, and a romantic aura that came from deep within his bones. All of these made Miao Yu very happy. His heart was beating faster and faster, and he could even hear Miao Yu's heartbeat becoming more and more intense. Cupping his fist and bowing to Goddess Miao Xian, Wu Qi said in a deep voice, Goddess, this fellow Taoist is Lao Ai, and he has just joined us recently. Senior Miao Yu, I've thoroughly investigated his cultivation base and background, and found that he is a good man. Wu Qi gave Miao Yu a glance and said deliberately, Senior, this fellow has just been brought here. Don't you think he is being too arrogant? Why don't I give him a crack? Wu Qi made a scissors gesture and made an eerie crack sound. Lao Ai cupped his fist and said in a deep voice, I'm an itinerant cultivator from outer heavenly realm. As I've offended someone, I managed to rob some traveling expenses and come to Pangu continent. I heard that Pangu continent is full of rare and precious treasures, especially in all kinds of dangerous places. I've heard the name of the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean by chance, and that's why I've come all the way here to try my luck. Goddess, who are these people? Duke of Longyang asked with a chuckle. Right in the center of the great hall was a high platform, and on top of it was a cloud bed shrouded in a light muslin. At the moment, there was no one on the cloud bed. Miao Yu stared blankly at Lao Ai, who was using something to push the ore cart along the mine path. She sucked in a cold breath for the time it took to finish a pot of tea. Chi, when goddess Miao Xin saw Miao Yu lying in Lao Ai's arms, her eyes flickered. Wu Qi's purpose was to find an excuse to ask Miao Yu to come down to the mine. Upon hearing her words, Wu Qi smiled and said, "I'm not bothering goddess with anything important. But, since I'm already an outer sect disciple of Miaoying Palace, and I'm also practicing the cultivation technique of the Fiend League, may I ask?" Wu Qi smiled faintly and did not say a word. He was grumbling in his mind that his actions were getting more and more unscrupulous and despicable. But, this was the naked world of immortal cultivators, and this was the necessary quality of an immortal cultivator. If you were not ruthless and despicable, you would be killed by the ruthless and despicable means. This was a dog-eat-dog world. Chapter 500. Cold, merciless, cruel, tyrannical, sinister, vicious. All sorts of negative emotions tangled together, turning into a pitch-black fiend aura that rose into the sky like glue. In just a blink of an eye, the entire dark abyss of the Northern Ocean was dyed pitch-black. The fiend aura rolled and rocked, turning into countless whirlpools that twisted and twisted under the surface of the water. Shrill, unpleasant cries of fiends rang out one after another, shaking the souls of those who heard them as if they were about to be sucked out of their bodies. Wu Qi struggled bitterly in the towering fiend aura. At first, he wanted to use the divine flame of order to resist the attack of the cries, but it seemed that the flame was not strong enough to withstand such a monstrous fiend aura. There were a few times when it was nearly extinguished by the cries, which frightened Wu Qi so much that he quickly hid it deep in his spiritual ocean, not daring to use it again. Left with no other choice, Wu Qi could only silently exercise the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture, unleashing the fiend aura of purgatory to surround him and resist the attack of the fiend aura. As soon as the fiend aura was unleashed, the air around Wu Qi was immediately filled with a heavy aura of death, as well as a strong stench of rotting corpses. The grey aura of death and the black fiend aura mixed together, and the attack of the fiend aura on Wu Qi was suddenly weakened by more than 90%. Wu Qi could barely stand still under the impact of the waves of fiend aura. Standing next to Wu Qi, Lao Ai's eyes were wide open. He chuckled as he straightened his lower body like a pillar, while a pink light kept rushing out from all over his body. Amidst the light, countless pink skulls could be vaguely seen, while a lustful aura towered into the sky. As the surrounding black fiend aura sensed the evil aura unleashed from Lao Ai's body, the attack of the fiend aura on him was greatly weakened. Lao Ai could barely stand still next to Wu Qi. King Zhangqiu was sitting straight on the cloud bed, not moving at all. 9 strange skulls carved out of white jade were hovering above his head, arranged according to the positions of the 9 palaces. Plumes of smoke sprayed out of the skull's 7 apertures, forming a protective barrier around King Zhangqiu. No matter how the dark fiend energy rolled and billowed, it just could not shake the barrier. Goddess Miao Xian sat steadily on the cloud bed, her body emanating a dark airflow that was of the same origin and nature as the surrounding fiend energy. Countless fiends crowded around her, letting out deafening hisses. She took a deep breath in enjoyment, constantly absorbing the demonic qi around her into her body, turning it into her own magic power. Among all of them, she was the most relaxed one. Among the crowd, Lu Buwei and Lord Longyang seemed to be in the most pain. 5 ferocious-looking little ghosts appeared next to Lu Buwei, wheeling rapidly around Lu Buwei, filling the air with a large sheet of ghost aura. However, it was obvious that the devil Qi didn't care about Lu Buwei's ghost Qi at all. The devil Qi crazily tore and devoured the ghost Qi brought by the 5 little ghosts. Lu Buwei's face turned pale, blue, purple, and green. His complexion changed in an instant, and blood slowly oozed out from all the pores on his body. His spirit Qi was being crazily plundered by the surrounding devil Qi. Lord Longyang sat next to King Zhangqiu, with a large white lotus blooming above his head waving in the wind, emanating millions upon millions of white beams that enveloped his entire body. Under the attack of the fiend energy, the white lotus blooming above his head was on the verge of falling. In just 2 to 3 seconds, it had turned black, and the white lotus looked like a zebra. His slender body was trembling like a leaf in the autumn wind, about to be devoured by the fiend energy at any time. King Zhangqiu turned and gave Lord Longyang a look. A trace of gentleness flashed across his eyes, and it was the first human-like tenderness that Wu Qi found in King Zhangqiu. He cleared his throat, and the 9 white jade skulls above his head shrieked in unison, unleashing a vast cloud of smoke that enveloped Lord Longyang. Lord Longyang breathed a heavy sigh of relief. With a faint smile on his face, he nodded at King Zhangqiu. When Lord Longyang smiled faintly and nodded his head slightly, it was as if countless spring flowers were blooming in the spring breeze. Everyone in the hall, regardless of their age or gender, including Lao Ai and Lu Buwei, felt their heartstrings being tugged and their hearts beating violently for a few times. King Zhangqiu, who was as rigid as a block of granite, was slightly taken aback. He laughed dryly, and his face turned red. Right at this moment, the entire hall was filled with ghostly howls and cries, while plumes of dark smoke and green flames rose from the floor of the hall. Goddess Miao Xian rose to her feet abruptly, bowed toward the cloud bed wrapped in a veil, and said, "Disciple Miao Xian welcomes Master to come out of seclusion." The fiend energy that blotted the sky retracted abruptly, then quickly converged toward the cloud bed on the platform. The pressure on everyone was instantly lifted. Without hesitation, Wu Qi and the others followed Goddess Miao Xian and bowed toward the cloud bed. Miao Yu, who was held in Lao Ai's arms, struggled to stand on the ground as well. She bowed respectfully, not daring to show any carelessness. The veil on the cloud bed parted, revealing Patriarch Miao Ying's true form before everyone's eyes. She had the appearance of a 13 or 14-year-old girl, with a slender and curvaceous body that looked like it was carved out of the finest white jade. Every curve and every corner of her body was exquisite and beautiful, and no flaws could be found. Reclining on the cloud bed, Patriarch Miaoying was stark naked. Her hair, over 30 feet long, swayed gently like weeds in the water, gently brushing across her beautiful body, like a long veil that covered a few important parts of her body. What was even worse was that there were gaps in her hair. As the hair flowed, a few of the most attractive parts of Patriarch Miao Ying's body would be exposed in front of the crowd from time to time. Coupled with the faint glow emanating from her crystal jade-like skin, her sacred and pure face, it gave off a strong contrast. Yet, such a sacred and pure face was giving off an extremely evil temptation. Just by giving Patriarch Miaoying a glance, Wu Qi could not help but feel his body heat up, and an evil thought rose out of nowhere. Even a peerless evil man like Lao Ai had his eyes fixed on Patriarch Miaoying. His trousers were ripped open with a loud crack, revealing a pair of indecent things in front of everyone. Lu Buwei turned to look at Lao Ai, pointed his finger at him, and snapped, "How dare you blaspheme our patriarch? Somebody, drag him away and behead him. Scatter his soul and send him to the 9 nether hell, never to be reincarnated." Outside the hall, a few longbow men clad in heavy armors rushed in with big strides, and were about to capture Lao Ai. Patriarch Miaoying opened her eyes at the right moment. Her pair of sky-blue eyes that looked like supreme-grade sapphires rolled and glanced at Lao Ai's item smilingly. 9 dragons embracing pillar. What an extraordinary innate talent. For so many years, this is the first time I've seen the legendary 9 dragons embracing pillar. Hee, little boy, do you think I'm beautiful? Following Patriarch Miao Ying's words, the few longbow men who rushed in bowed and retreated to a corner of the hall without making a sound. Lao Ai straightened his neck and stared fixedly at Patriarch Miao Ying's slender and graceful body. Laughing loudly, he said, "The beauty of Patriarch is beyond Junior's ability to describe with words. Junior is also a man who hangs around with flowers, and has tasted countless beauties. That's why I have a strong self-control. But, when I see Patriarch, I'm behaving like this. You can tell how beautiful Patriarch is." Patriarch Miaoying giggled, nodded, and said, "What an interesting boy. Miao Xian, you should keep him first." Patriarch Miaoying gave Lao Ai a fierce look, then gave Wu Qi a sidelong glance and said, Inferno Hell Fiend Scripture. Interesting. Before the apocalypse, this Inferno Hell Fiend Scripture enjoyed a great reputation in outer heavenly realms. But too bad, those fools had offended someone they should not have, and their entire clan was killed. Thus, the legacy of Inferno Hell Fiend Scripture was cut off. The fact that you are fated to inherit this scripture makes you a member of the Fiend sect. Patriarch Miaoying straightened her back and sat cross-legged on the cloud bed. She stared at Wu Qi and said, "If you can cultivate to the realm of gold immortal, I'll take you as my disciple. Before that, you can do whatever you are supposed to do. Miao Xian, teach him some basic knowledge, and teach him all the rules that he should follow. Make sure he follows them well." After a brief moment of pondering, Patriarch Miaoying pointed at Wu Qi and said with a smile, "The Inferno Hell Fiend Scripture and the cultivation technique of Miaoying Palace can still be used as reference. You have to train this boy well, and make the best use of his talents. Don't let his benefits go to waste." Wu Qi cupped his fist and bowed silently, thanking Patriarch Miaoying. Patriarch Miaoying smiled faintly, then turned her eyes to Lu Buwei. Hastily, Lu Buwei bowed and said with a smile, "Patriarch, your old servant has prepared 49 of your favorite virgin boys with the 7 kills realm." Patriarch Miaoying pondered for a brief moment, then nodded slowly and said, "You have put in a lot of effort to find 49 virgin boys with the 7 kills realm. Miao Xian, you can decide the reward for them." She waved her hand. Immediately, Wu Qi and Lao Ai felt their bodies lightened. The surrounding light and shadows shifted, and both of them were sent out of the grand hall at the same time. Vaguely, a voice could be heard coming out of the grand hall. It was Patriarch Miaoying, who was giggling and asking, "King Zhangqiu, are you here because of what happened last time?" Just by hearing that, a large sheet of black smoke and fiend aura rose from the inside and outside of the grand hall, cutting off all the words that could be heard. Wu Qi gave Lao Ai a look, then pointed at his crotch. Lao Ai smiled sheepishly as he pulled out a piece of hide and wrapped it around his waist. Then, he asked in a low voice, "What are we going to do now? What is the meaning of sending us out just like that?" Before his voice could fade away, a dark light flickered from the main entrance of the grand hall, as Goddess Miao Xian walked out with Miao Feng and Miao Yu. Goddess Miao Xian gave Wu Qi a look, then casually threw a jade slip over to him. "These are some elementary cultivation techniques of Miaoying Palace. Study them carefully. They include the Tao of Formation, Tao of Talisman, Tao of Alchemy, and many others. But, since you are cultivating the Inferno Hell Fiend Scripture, and Master knows the origin of this fiend cultivation technique, there is no need for you to change your cultivation technique. You can just focus on studying the cultivation technique of your own, and then cultivate these supplementary cultivation techniques." After dismissing Wu Qi, Goddess Miao Xian crooked her finger at Lao Ai. Her long tongue licked the bridge of her nose as she chuckled and said, "Your name is Lao Ai. You have an extraordinary innate talent in 9 dragons embracing pillar." "Hee, Miao Yu said you are too amazing for words. I'd like to see how amazing you are." Lao Ai roared with laughter, then cupped his fist at Goddess Miao Xian and said, "Goddess, just give it a try, and you will know." Goddess Miao Xian laughed out loud. She crooked her finger at Lao Ai, then grabbed his hand with one hand and brought him deeper into Miaoying Palace. Wu Qi stood outside the grand hall, looking at Lao Ai who was brought away by Goddess Miao Xian. He felt that Lao Ai's back was like a hero of the martial world who was about to be sent to the execution ground, filled with a feeling that he would become a hero again after 18 years. "Lao Ai, you've suffered a lot." Chapter 501. Many cultivators were still laboriously hammering the ores in the pitch-dark mine. The tinkling noises lingered endlessly. Under the supervision of several hundred supervising cultivators and over 1,000 yikshas, the several thousand cultivators dared not to slack off. They used all their strength to excavate the ores, and the daily output of ores they produced was about 20% more than when Lu Buwei was the supervising cultivator. In the mine where Wuqi lived, he asked the Yikshaws to help him excavate a square grotto, measuring 1,000 feet in both width and length, and about 1 mile in height. Sitting cross-legged in the middle of the grotto, Wuqi stared blankly at the ceiling. The surrounding walls were filled with extremely complicated patterns of formations and runes. Minor Universe Yiksha Soul-Depriving Formation. While muttering the name of the formation under his breath, Wuqi's mind had entered a state of enlightenment, using all his strength to analyze and dissect the profound principles of the formation. The Minor Universe Yiksha Soul-Depriving Formation was only the most basic formation among the over 1,000 fiend formations of Miaoying Palace. However, as long as he could fully understand it, it would be equivalent to finding a foothold in the vast Tao of formations of Miaoying Palace, and through this foothold, he would be able to analyze other more complicated formations. With the abstruse and complicated essence of formations found in the Scroll of Stealing as his foundation, although Miaoying Palace's formations were ever-changing and extremely complicated, what Wuqi lacked was just a key. After carving the formation patterns of the Minor Universe Yiksha Soul-Depriving Formation on the walls, ceiling, and floor, Wuqi entered a state of enlightenment and exercised the mystic eyes of universe with all his might. Countless three-dimensional formation patterns flashed before his eyes. The fiend formations of Miaoying Palace were of the same origin as the several tens of thousands of formations of the Tao of Fiend, Tao of Evil, and Tao of Ghost recorded in the Scroll of Stealing. It was as if they were the result of combining several dozens of Tao of formations together and going through some complicated transformation. It was like Wuqi had mastered countless basic mathematical formulas, and through them, he was going to derive more advanced knowledge like calculus. The basic knowledge of formations provided by Goddess Miao Xin was the theoretical foundation that led him from the basic formulas to calculus. Wuqi had been in the state of enlightenment to comprehend the Minor Universal Yiksha Soul-Detaching Array for 3 months. He didn't sleep, rest, or eat for 3 months, and he was immersed in the state of Tao comprehension at all times. The knowledge he obtained in every 15 minutes was comparable to what an ordinary cultivator would obtain in several years or dozens of years. In just 3 months, Wuqi's understanding of the Minor Universe Yiksha Soul-Depriving Formation was comparable to the several tens of thousands of years of studying by those cultivators of Miaoying Palace who were experts in the Tao of formations. Suddenly, Wuqi's fingers moved slightly, and 3,600 lower-grade spirit stones flew out, forming a complex three-dimensional formation in front of him. It was an inverted pyramid with 13 layers, and each layer was densely covered with complicated runes. Right after the formation was formed, several dozens of ferocious yikshas emerged out of thin air. Shrill ghost howls lingered in the cave, while an immense aura of death spread out in all directions. Even Wuqi himself could not help but shudder. The yikshas in the minor universe of yikshas soul-separating formation were not the patrolling yikshas in the mines outside. They were hell yikshas, who were summoned from the deepest part of the legendary land of reincarnation in the 9 serenities hell by the power of the formation. They were said to be the dirtiest and evilest water in the world. They were hell yikshas, whose natures were equivalent to extraterrestrial devils. Nether yikshas looked very similar to the yikshas on Panga continent, but their overall strength was 100 times stronger, and their temperament was thousands of times more ferocious and evil. They were the most ferocious and brutal strange creatures under the heaven. The dozens of nether yikshas raised their steel tridents and were about to pounce on Wuqi. But, Wuqi, who was immersed in the state of Tao comprehension, glared at them with his emotionless eyes. A beam of purple and green divine flame of order shot out from his mystic eyes, piercing through the hearts of these yikshas. The divine flame roared and burned, and the dozens of yikshas howled miserably as they were refined into fist-sized nether pearls that contained all of their energy essence. Not waiting for these nether pearls to fall to the ground, Wuqi moved his fingers slightly. Several dozens of nether pearls glinting with a dark gleam spun whistling up into the air, following Wuqi's will and embedding them into several dozens of seemingly unimportant runes in the minor universe yiksha soul-detaching array. Then, he pointed his finger out and recited an incantation. A few cracking noises rang out as the nether pearls shattered, and the minor universe yiksha soul-detaching array transformed into a hazy shadow, twisting and twisting. Then, all 3,600 lower-grade energy stones shattered at the same time, and the formation was easily destroyed by Wu Qi. Excellent! A strange gleam flickered in Wu Qi's eyes. He had learned all the ingenuity of the minor universe Yaksha soul detaching array. With that, the Tao of Miaoying Palace's Tao of Formations was revealed to Wu Qi. The Tao of Formations of Miaoying Palace was extremely mysterious and profound, but the essence of formations found in Scroll of Stealing was still very useful here. At the end of the day, all the fiend formations of Miaoying Palace were strange, unpredictable, ferocious, and ruthless. Strange meant novel and bizarre. The transformation of the formation was extremely marvelous, and the arrangement of the formations was completely different from other formations. Unpredictable meant ever-changing. The transformation of an orthodox formation might only be able to produce 300 different restrictive spells with a flick of a finger, but the minor universe Yaksha soul detaching array could produce 36,000 different restrictive spells with just a flick of a finger, just like the various restrictive spells Wu Qi had seen in Miaoying Palace. Fearsome, as the name suggested, meant extremely dangerous. The entire formation was filled with perilous lands, and there was no escape gate as per common sense. Ruthless, all the fiend formations and formation diagrams of Miaoying Palace were constructed with the help of various malicious and ruthless creatures under the heaven. Heavenly devils, Ean deities from outer domains, nether yakshas, and so on, all the formations used these ferocious and ruthless creatures as the core. Once someone was trapped in the formation would rip open the void and draw countless ferocious creatures into it. No matter how powerful a primordial immortal was, if he or she could not break out of the formation after a long period of time, he or she would be devoured by the endless ferocious creatures sooner or later. A woman is a woman. Even a primordial immortal is a woman. After comprehending the minor universe Yaksha soul detaching array, Wu Qi had gained a better understanding of Patriarch Miaoying. Even though she was a primordial immortal, she was still a woman. To put it bluntly, the Tao of formations she studied gave Wu Qi the impression that she was narrow-minded. Only a woman could make the formation so ever-changing and bizarre. As the saying goes, nothing is more vicious than a woman's heart. Patriarch Miaoying feared that those who were trapped in the formation would not die, and that was why she had racked her brain to find so many malicious and ruthless creatures as the most lethal force of the formation. And that was the problem. Miaoying Palace's fiend formation relied on external forces, and that gave Wu Qi an opportunity. If Miaoying Palace's fiend formation was an upright formation that utilized the power of the heaven and earth, Wu Qi would be powerless when facing a formation of this level. But, since the formation had borrowed the power of the living beings from the outer heavenly realms, just like how he was able to destroy the minor universe Yaksha soul-depriving formation with the power of these living beings, it was equivalent to Miaoying Palace destroying their own formation with their own formation. This is my only chance to break the formation at the entrance of the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean. Wu Qi clenched his jaws and nodded silently. He took a deep breath and waved his hand casually in all directions. One after another, the formation diagrams on the surrounding walls shattered to pieces, revealing a clean and smooth wall that was as smooth as a mirror. Wu Qi moved his fingers slightly, and the next formation diagram of the minor universe fiend immortal transformation array gradually took shape on the wall. It was at least twice as complicated as the minor universe Yaksha soul detaching array just now. The complicated veins of the formation diagrams and the inlaid runes were enough to make any ordinary immortal's brain boil. Fortunately, Wu Qi had the support of Lu Xiaobai's insane intellect, and he had consumed the heavenly wit fruit, which was an innate spirit item. On top of that, he could enter the state of enlightenment at any time to study the formation. Therefore, although the minor universe fiend immortal transformation array was twice as complicated as the minor universe Yaksha soul detaching array just now, in his eyes, it was much easier to crack. He had found the end of a thread amidst the countless threads, and with that, he would be able to analyze the entire Tao of formations of Miaoying Palace. Time. He needed time. Given enough time, he was confident that he could completely crack all the formation diagrams of Miaoying Palace. Luckily, Patriarch Miao-ing is not a real grandmaster of formations. Wu Qi suddenly had this realization while studying the minor universe fiend immortal transformation array. Patriarch Miao-ing was not a real grandmaster of formations. What she was most proficient in was another skill recorded in the Jade Slip, the Tao of Alchemy. Luckily, she was not a grandmaster who specialized in the study of Tao of formations. Otherwise, the Tao of formations of Miao-ing Palace would be at least 100 times more profound than it was now. With that, it would be impossible for Wu Qi to understand the method to crack any single formation in a short period of time, let alone find out the principle to crack all the Tao of formations of Miao-ing Palace. Soon, 1 month had passed, and Wu Qi had cracked the minor universe fiend immortal transformation array with a casual move. Half a month later, the minor universe 7 lustful fiends formation was broken by Wu Qi with a flick of his finger. Another half a month later, Wu Qi destroyed all the entry-level formations of 7 Miao-ing Palace effortlessly with just one strike. There were only a few foundational formations in the Jade Slip, and Wu Qi needed to study and crack more advanced formations. But, Goddess Miao Xian only gave him these few foundational formations. Normally, it would take a heaven immortal who had just joined Miao-ing Palace for several thousand, or even tens of thousands of years of painstaking effort to study and crack these formations. Slowly, Wu Qi rose to his feet, narrowed his eyes, and said in a deep voice, "I need more diagrams of Miao-ing Palace's fiend formations." What has this guy been doing these days? With a sway of his body, a series of cracking noises were heard coming from Wu Qi's body. In just 5 months of cultivation, the strength of Wu Qi's fleshly body had skyrocketed by more than 10 times. His strong fleshly body had nearly clogged up all his meridians, and the inferno hell fiend energy could hardly flow through them. Sure enough, the true body of heaven and earth scripture was incompatible with the cultivation techniques of immortals. After cultivating this cultivation technique, the meridians in one's body would be gradually filled with the purple mist, and all immortal energies and energies would not be able to flow through the meridians. At the same time, the immortal's soul would be gradually absorbed by the fleshly body, turning back into the soul of an ordinary human being. This was the limit. He could no longer cultivate the true body of heaven and earth scripture, or else, Wu Qi would not be able to cast the various spells found in the Inferno Hell Fiend scripture. Shaking his head and sighing discontentedly, Wu Qi waved his arms. His 7 stealing heaven meridians showed no change, and his innate energies had perfectly reached a balance with the purple mist he had absorbed into his body. Suddenly, Wu Qi thought of the thread of innate yang energy he found in the dark abyss of the Northern Ocean. As long as he could form the innate chaotic spirit body, with the all-encompassing characteristic of the chaotic body, he would definitely be able to cultivate 2 cultivation techniques at the same time. The true body of heaven and earth scripture and the 7 foundation elevating technique were 2 cultivation techniques that could cultivate both the inner and outer body, as well as the incomparably strong fleshly body of the human race, as well as the divine abilities and spells of countless immortal armors. Wu Qi would have a bright future ahead of him. Letting out a loud cry of excitement, Wu Qi leaped and ran wildly in the cave. Suddenly, the stone door of the cave was pushed open by someone. Lao Ai, whose face was glowing with a red glow, and Lord Long Yang, who was extremely delicate and gentle, walked into the cave side by side. Chapter 502. Looking at Lao Ai and Lord Long Yang, Wu Qi's first thought was, could it be that these two are having an affair? But in the blink of an eye, Wu Qi shook off the absurd thought. Who were these 2 men? There was absolutely no affair between them. To put it bluntly, how could 2 peerless venomous creatures sleep together in the same bed? Were they not afraid that someone next to them would stab them with a sword? Both of them knew each other very well. It was possible for them to collude with each other for the sake of benefits, but it was impossible for them to have an affair. Cupping his fist and smiling, Wu Qi said, "Fellow Taoist Lao Ai, and this." Wu Qi rolled his eyes and looked up into the sky, signaling everyone to be careful. Miao-ing Palace was right in front of them, and they were guarded by a primordial immortal and at least a gold immortal. Their every move could be discovered. Lord Longyang chuckled and closed the stone door behind him. Then, he fished out a bone talisman from under his sleeve and stuck it on the door. Smiling at Wu Qi, he said, "Don't worry. I have a spirit item given to me by King Zhangqiu, a spirit item crafted by an elder of De Yu's imperial clan. Even a primordial immortal could not eavesdrop on our conversation without alerting us. Therefore, we don't have to worry about anyone spying on us within an area of about 1 mile around us." Wu Qi's eyes lit up. Is there really such a good item? He gave Lord Longyang a glance, then suddenly let out a strange laugh and said, "My lord, you seem to be very pleased with yourself." Lord Longyang walked to the center of the cave in an enchanting manner, then fished out a long table, hassock, teacups, and some other things from his storage ring. After a brief moment of work, a pot of fragrant tea was produced, and the three of them sat around the long table, raised their teacups, and laughed aloud. To be able to sit opposite each other and enjoy tea so leisurely in such a dangerous place made them feel that life was like a dream. There was nothing more incredible than this. The three laughs were filled with joy, but there was also a hint of mockery in them. "My lord is indeed my lord." Wu Qi raised his teacup and emptied it in one gulp, then said with a smile, "I'm afraid that King Zhangqiu is already under your control, my lord." Perhaps not many people in the entire De Yu dynasty were qualified to own a spirit item that could isolate the divine will of a primordial immortal from peeping. The fact that Duke of Longyang possessed such a spirit item showed how infatuated King Zhangqiu was with him. Presumably, it was King Zhangqiu's personal defensive treasure, but now, it had become Lord Longyang's personal treasure. Lord Longyang's ability was truly amazing. Lord Longyang smiled delicately, covered his face with his sleeve, and gently drank the cup of fragrant tea. When he put down the teacup, the enchanting beauty had turned into a heroic man. His voice also changed from a soft and weak female voice to a sonorous and powerful male voice. "It's just a small matter. What's the big deal? This King Zhangqiu is easy to deal with." With a proud smile on his face, Lord Longyang shook his head and said, "But, I think Prince of Changxin has obtained a great reward this time, right?" Lao Ai smiled, pointing at his own nose complacently as he said to Wu Qi, "After 4 months of fierce battle, I'm afraid I'm the first mighty man under the heaven who can make a gold immortal cry and beg for mercy. The result of the battle is truly glorious. After plucking a thread of Goddess Miao Xian's true yin, my cultivation base has risen from 36th tier heaven immortal to 9th tier. Wonderful. Wonderful." Wu Qi sucked in a cold breath, staring at Lao Ai as if he was looking at a ghost. This demon is really not a good guy. Wu Qi already felt that he was an amazing man for being able to fight against someone with Goddess Miao Xian's beauty. But, he was also able to kill Goddess Miao Xian, a mighty gold immortal, and make her cry and beg for mercy. What a mighty man he was. As for the fact that he could pluck a thread of Goddess Miao Xian's true yin, allowing his cultivation base to rise by 9 tiers, Lao Ai was born to live off a woman. Filled with jealousy and hatred, Wu Qi cursed Lao Ai in his heart. Then, he pulled the corner of his mouth and cupped his fist at Lao Ai as he said, "Congratulations. I can't believe that a thread of energy essence from a gold immortal could bring such a great benefit to Prince of Changxin. I wonder what will happen if..." Haha. Lao Ai's mouth twitched. After a brief moment of hesitation, he frowned, shook his head and said, "It's just a thread of energy essence, and it is just a few years of hard work for her. For a heaven immortal, it is an incredible achievement. But, for a gold immortal, it is just a few years of hard work. If I really want to get more benefits from her, I'm afraid my current position in her heart is still not as good as mine." After a brief moment of pondering, Wu Qi's heart was rocked. After pondering for a long while, he finally made up his mind. Worldly possessions were worldly possessions. No matter how magical a treasure was, how could it be more useful than one's own cultivation base? For the sake of that thread of innate yang energy, he would risk it all. With a thought in his spiritual ocean, a stream of green mist rushed out of the dark Yin energy vase. A great amount of pure Yin true water wrapped around the Ganoderma horse and Ganoderma liquid, hovering in Wuqi's spiritual ocean. After that, the dark Yin energy vase slowly flew out from between Wuqi's brows. Holding the dark Yin energy vase with both hands, Wuqi turned to Lao Ai and said with a smile, Prince of Chengxin is indeed an extraordinary talent to be able to fight with a lady with goddess Miao Xian's beauty for a few months. I can't even catch up to you. Duke of Longyang was rocking back and forth with laughter. He smashed the table with both hands and nearly fainted from the laughter. He pointed his finger at Lao Ai, whose face had turned livid, and said, that goddess Miao Xian's eloquent tongue is truly admirable. I suppose Prince of Chengxin must have tried it many times over the past few months. Lao Ai's cheeks twitched with rage. Feeling ashamed and angry, he was about to draw his sword and challenge Duke of Longyang to a duel. Hastily, Wuqi shoved the dark Yin energy vase into Lao Ai's bosom and said, this is a spirit treasure, the dark Yin energy vase. As long as enough water element energy stones are injected into it and controlled with an incantation, it will produce the spirit ripple true water. Fearing that Lao Ai did not know the origin of the spirit ripple true water, Wuqi told him about its magical effects. Lao Ai's eyes lit up instantly. Excitedly, he grabbed Wuqi's arm and said, you mean goddess Miao Xian? She was a peerless beauty in those years. But, she became like this because she was cursed by the evil shape-shifting curse? The spirit ripple true water can restore her beauty. Wuqi nodded slightly and said, that's right. Pointing at the dark Yin energy vase, Wuqi smiled and said, with this treasure, Prince of Chengxin's position in goddess Miao Xian's heart will be obvious. Women, even if they are gold immortals, are still women. How can a woman not care about her beauty? As long as Prince of Chengxin can restore goddess Miao Xian's beauty. Ha ha ha, I'll need your help when I'm here in the future. Lao Ai narrowed his eyes and slapped hard on Wuqi's shoulder. My good brother, with this treasure, doesn't that mean I can have as many beauties as I want? Even if they are yikshas or demons, I can turn them into peerless beauties. Excellent, excellent. This treasure is really useful to me. Well, for the sake of this treasure, I'll let bygones be bygones. From now on, we will be good brothers, and we should support each other on Pangu continent. Wuqi and Lao Ai exchanged a glance and burst into laughter. Wuqi knew that with a treasure like the dark Yin energy vase, it seemed like Lao Ai had finally become closer to him this time. In the past, Lao Ai had been forced to submit to him because of the conflict of interests, or because of the situation. But this time, Lao Ai had become closer to him. Duke of Longyang had his eyes fixed on the dark Yin energy vase as well. After a long while, he breathed out a faint sigh and said bitterly, Spirit ripple true water? How could there be such a magical item in the world? What a pity, why is it only useful to my daughter? Wuqi dared not answer Duke of Longyang's question. Instead, he changed the topic and asked with a smile, My lord, is there anything we can help you with this trip? Lightly tapping the table with his finger, Wuqi said, My lord and Wuqi have made a promise many years ago, that you and I are allies. Duke of Longyang smiled. He gave the dark Yin energy vase in Lao Ai's hand a glance, then nodded and said, Longyang is never a man who goes back on his word. His Majesty, Great Wei, has ordered me to bring a group of my sons to Pangu continent, to be a scout, and see if there are any opportunities that we can take advantage of. I'm very lucky to have met King Zhangqiu right after I arrived here, and we hit it off at first sight. With a faint smile on his face, Duke of Longyang sighed and said, I don't have any other plans now, I just want to make money. Otherwise, when will His Majesty and the others be able to bring countless ministers and soldiers of Great Wei to Pangu continent? Just to make money. Wuqi recalled what Yen Bugue had told him, that because of the high cost of traveling, only 1,000 elites could be sent to Pangu continent in the first batch. The more he thought about it, the more he felt something was amiss. Frowning, Wuqi pondered for a while, then looked at Duke of Longyang and said, "My lord, when I came to Panga continent from outer heavenly realms, I brought 10,000 longbow men with me in my spirit breeding ring." Duke of Longyang was taken aback. In just a few words, he told Wuqi about what happened when they came to Panga continent separately. After that, he spread his arms and said with a wry smile, "I see. When Longyang brought his men here, they were searched by the immortal officers of the celestial court. Their storage rings were ignored, but the spirit breeding rings belonging to a few spirit beasts were searched over and over again by them." Lao Ai laughed and said, "You are the only one who made such a mistake. You were the one who killed all the officials of the celestial court and you with a heavenly thunderbolt. Otherwise, it would be hard for you to explain to those 10,000 longbow men." Wuqi smiled wryly and said, "So, I do have to earn a little bit of money to move them here from outer heavenly realms?" Duke of Longyang sighed lightly and said, "If the spirit breeding ring can be used in this way, what if an almighty expert suddenly brought several hundred formidable immortals to Panga continent, massacred a city in a province, and then left?" The three of them looked at each other speechlessly. However, as this matter had nothing to do with Wuqi, he shook his head and changed the topic, focusing his attention on the pressing matter at hand. Then, he asked, "If both of you are so kind, please keep an eye on something for me. I'm in urgent need of the diagrams of fiend formations in Miaoying Palace, and I hope both of you can help me collect them. The more the better." Upon hearing Wuqi's words, Duke of Longyang covered his mouth and giggled. With a smile on his face, Duke of Longyang fished out a scroll made of jade from under his sleeve and gave it to Wuqi. Then, he said with a charming smile on his face, "Consider this a great favor that Longyang has done you. Remember to repay this favor in the future. King Zhangqiu is working with Miaoying Palace, and he has the diagrams of many fiend formations of Miaoying Palace. To please me, he has given me a copy of all these diagrams." Wild with joy, Wuqi snatched the scroll from Duke of Longyang's hand and sent his divine will into it. Sure enough, it was filled with countless records, all of which were the detailed diagrams of countless fiend formations of Miaoying Palace. But, as he thought about it, Wuqi gasped with astonishment, "King Zhangqiu has all the diagrams of fiend formations of Miaoying Palace? Why is he working with Miaoying Palace? A king of the human race working with a primordial immortal? Why did it sound like there was a strange chill in his voice?" Chapter 503. Colorful streams of light were wheeling and wheeling in the tunnel. Princess Zhanglu was sitting cross-legged on a silver lotus throne that glowed with a five-colored light. Her body was shrouded in an auspicious light as she flew at high speed through the tunnel. Every now and then, the five-colored divine ray behind her would roll, and she would teleport a great distance forward with her lotus throne. On average, her speed of flying here was more than 10 times faster than the average speed of other immortals traveling from outer heavenly realms to Panga continent through ultra-long-distance teleportation formations. In a corner of the lotus throne, Lord Xiansheng and Catfish were carefully sitting cross-legged, clutching the throne tightly with both hands for fear that they would be thrown out. Princess Zhanglu had exercised her divine ability to speed up the journey, but they could not afford to travel at such a high speed. Once they were thrown out of the lotus throne, they would be lost in this boundless dimension, and even a primordial immortal would not be able to find them. Only the heartless Gold Horn and Silver Horn were sitting lazily next to Princess Zhanglu, snoring. A human leg was hanging from Gold Horn's mouth, and an arm was hanging from Silver Horn's. Obviously, they had just had a hearty meal. They were an unlucky fellow with a cultivation base of 27th tier heaven immortal who was in the tunnel just now. Relying on a shuttle-shaped magical treasure that allowed him to move within a small range in the tunnel, the man saw Princess Zhanglu passing by him. Bewitched by Princess Zhanglu's beauty, he went up and flirted with Princess Zhanglu. As a result, the man's shuttle-shaped magical treasure was shattered by the five-colored divine ray, and his bones were crushed by the terrible pressure of the tunnel. Gold Horn and Silver Horn were the best at finding opportunities. Before Lord Xiansheng and Catfish could open their mouths, they sprung up and tore the man into two halves, each biting one half of the body. The poor 27th tier heaven immortal did not even have the strength to resist, and was eaten alive. All his energy essence had been taken by Gold Horn and Silver Horn. Suddenly, Princess Xianglu, who had been meditating with her eyes closed, opened her eyes slightly, and the five-colored divine light behind her became several times brighter. The five-colored light spread in all directions, and the silver lotus throne sped up again. Patriarch Yuan Hua, if the people you sent here hurt even a single hair on Wu Qi's head, I'll definitely slaughter every single member of Yuan Hua sect, leaving no one alive. Princess Xianglu gnashed her teeth fiercely and clenched her fists so hard that her knuckles started creaking. The sisters, Peppermint and Angelica, who were sitting cautiously beside Princess Xianglu, stuck out their tongues and hurriedly closed their eyes, not daring to look any longer. Wu Qi, you have to hold on. No matter how many people Patriarch Yuan Hua sends to kill you, you must not die. Behind Princess Xianglu, the five-colored divine light began to roll, and a faint five-colored light emerged from her eyes. Within a blink of an eye, her eyes turned into a frightening blood-red color. Within the tunnel, the silver lotus throne sped away into the distance, turning into a tiny silver speck and disappearing in the blink of an eye. On Pangu continent, on the outskirts of Zhongning City, the administrative center of Zhong Province, was the training ground for the new army of Zhong Province's punishment court. Yan Bugui, who had grown 1 foot taller than he was a few months ago, and his body was covered with muscles that looked like they were forged from steel. He was carrying a 1,000 feet tall hill on his shoulder, panting and running wildly across the training ground. Beside Yan Bugui, there were dozens of equally tall and burly men, carrying a small hill that was slightly smaller than the one Yan Bugui was carrying. The group of people had their eyes wide open, panting and screaming, running forward with all their might. Behind these men, dozens of ferocious beasts were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, following closely behind the few men who were running at the very back. Some of them gave them a slap on the buttocks, while others carefully took a bite out of them. Although these beasts were very careful, their mouths were too big, and their teeth were too sharp. Even a small bite could take away about half a kilogram of flesh from these men's buttocks. The few men who were lagging behind were crying and screaming in pain, their eyes wide open as they continued to run forward with the hill on their shoulder. Therefore, they gradually ran forward, leaving the few unlucky fellows behind. Before long, the few men who were lagging behind also howled miserably and continued to run forward, while a few more unlucky fellows slowed down and fell behind. After running around the drill ground for more than a dozen laps, the legs of a few men who were lagging behind suddenly went soft, and the small hills they were carrying fell to the ground with a loud rumble. The few men were paralyzed on the ground, unable to move. Those fierce beasts pounced on them without any hesitation, and used their claws and teeth to tear these men. Not long after, their bodies were badly mutilated, and their white bones could be seen in many places. The men were rolling and twitching on the ground while howling in pain. Soldiers clad in the uniform of the punishment army rushed over and drove away the ferocious beasts. Then, they dragged the men as if they were wooden poles into a great hall built from a row of boulders next to the training ground. The hall was pitch black, and on the ground was a pool, measuring about 1,000 feet in both width and length. The pool was filled with a blood-red medicinal liquid that gave off a pungent smell and was as thick as blood. The severely wounded men were dragged into the pool by the soldiers and thrown into it as if they were throwing away rubbish. Like some living creatures, the blood-red medicinal liquid quickly drilled into the bodies of these wounded men. The highly irritating medicinal liquid made the muscles around their wounds twitch, making them scream and howl in pain. Even their vocal cords were nearly torn apart. A group of tall and burly men stood above the pool, holding long whips made from python skin in their hands. Whenever they saw a man screaming the loudest, they would give him a vicious lash. When the whips landed on the bodies of the men who were howling in pain in the pool, they would leave a deep bloody mark on their bodies. When the medicinal liquid seeped into the bloody mark, the man who was whipped would let out another miserable howl. Then, the whips would be lashed again. On the training ground, Yen Bugue was the first to finish running 50 laps while carrying a 1,000 feet tall hill of pure rock. By the time he reached the finishing line, he was soaked in sweat and saw stars flashing before his eyes. After throwing the hill over 100 feet away, Yen Bugue dropped to his knees and placed his palms on the ground, panting violently. A criminal officer clad in a long black robe came over with a few soldiers. He stood in front of Yen Bugue, nodded satisfyingly and said, "Hu Bugue, you've come first in this monthly examination again. Very good. Among this batch of new recruits, you're the best." The criminal officer reached into his sleeve and pulled out a dark purple pill bottle. He threw it to Yen Bugue and said, "There are 3 marrow and bone strengthening pills in this bottle, enough to increase your fleshly strength by 10 times. According to your current progress, you should take these pills once every 3 months. By the time you finish taking these 3 pills, your overall strength will be strong enough to fight against a 36th tier heaven immortal." Yen Bugue received the pill bottle respectfully, then kowtowed 3 times to the criminal officer according to the rule of the punishment court. Yen Bugue's heart was filled with shock. Back on Myriad Immortal's planet, he had cultivated painstakingly with the power of beast souls for over 20 years, but he only had the cultivation base of peak stage Xiantian realm. But, back on Pangu continent, in the punishment court of Zhong province, by consuming secret pills, cultivating the true body of heaven and earth scripture, and having the oracles of the Directorate of Celestials help him gather some magical energy to temper his fleshly body, in less than a year, his cultivation base was strong enough to fight against a heaven immortal. The potential of the human race was simply too frightening. Clenching the pill bottle tightly, Yen Bugue said sincerely, "Thank you, Your Excellency." The criminal officer gave Yen Bugue a satisfied look, then nodded and said with a smile, "Rise, Your Excellency, the Grand Criminal Officer, has summoned you. He has a mission for you." Including Yen Bugue, among this batch of new recruits from the punishment court of Zhong province, the 12 soldiers with the best performance had rushed to the punishment court of Zhongning City to have an audience with the chief judge of Zhong province. Although it was a meeting, Yen Bugue and the others did not get to see what the Grand Criminal Officer looked like. In a pitch-black great hall, the Grand Criminal Officer was sitting on a throne shrouded in a dark mist. Yen Bugue knew that the Grand Criminal Officer of Zhong province was sitting there, but no matter how hard he tried, he could not see what the Grand Criminal Officer looked like. That thick and viscous black gas blocked Yen Bugue's probing eyes. A deep, powerful, and dignified voice was heard coming from the direction of the throne. "You are the most outstanding warriors in this batch of new recruits. You are the new recruits, so you are not stained with the aura of punishment court, and your faces have not been remembered by those who are scheming. Therefore, I have a mission for you. Each of you will lead a group of elite soldiers and sneak into 12 cities, collecting all the information you can find there. I have the authorization from His Excellency Feng Lingling, the prefecture overseer of Zhong province. During the mission, you are allowed to use any means necessary, including killing anyone who stands in your way. It does not matter if it is the officials of the human race, the common people, or those immortal cultivators who should be sent to the 9 nether hell, you are allowed to kill anyone who needs to be killed." The floor of the great hall lit up, revealing a detailed map of 300 provinces near Zhong province. 12 blinking dots were very eye-catching on the map. They were the targets of the mission that Yen Bugue and the others were going to carry out. You are free to choose where you want to go. Once you have made your decision, you will collect the money and medicines you need, and then select a group of less than 100 subordinates to accompany you. Free to choose where I want to go. Without much effort, Yen Bugue chose Anhe City, which was blinking brightly on the map. When all 12 of them had chosen their targets, the Grand Judicial Judge reminded them, "Remember, over a year ago, our punishment court lost a group of elite soldiers in the vicinity of these 12 cities. They were all your seniors, and their cultivation bases were stronger than all of you, and they had more experience than all of you. Your mission this time will be extremely dangerous. If you die, you will be compensated generously, and you do not have to worry about your families. Yen Bugue was the first to drop to his knees and cry out, "We will do our best to carry out the mission, even if we have to die 10,000 times. It is time for those reckless immortal cultivators to be taught a good lesson." Led by Yen Bugue, the other 11 men dropped to their knees and swore that they would do their best to carry out the mission and find out the truth of those cities. The Grand Criminal Officer clapped his hands approvingly and said with a dignified voice, "Well then, go now. Find out everything in those cities, and then." Gnashing his teeth, the Grand Criminal Officer said, "It is time to teach those reckless immortal cultivators a lesson." Led by a few criminal officers, Yen Bugue and the others left the punishment court, collected the belongings and equipment they needed, selected a group of trusted subordinates who were close to them, and secretly traveled to different places through the teleportation formations officially established by the U. A few days later, Yen Bugue brought a group of men and entered Enhi City. Chapter 504. They were either traveling merchants, peddlers, herb gatherers, or hunters who hunted rare birds and beasts for sale. Bringing with him a group of 100 subordinates, Yen Bugue entered Enhi City in a leisurely manner. Among this group of 100 men, over 30 of them were his former subordinates in scouting office. Therefore, this group of men was firmly under his control. Led by many people from scouting office, the group of 100 men was divided into small groups of 3 to 5, staying in inns of various sizes in Enhi City. Some even stayed in private houses. The middle and lower class of the human race on Pangu continent still maintained a simple and honest style. Although Enhi City had been occupied by immortal cultivators for a very long time, this simple and honest nature had not been lost. Yen Bugue's subordinates found some random excuses, paid some rent to the owners of some houses, and successfully stayed in their houses. Right after Yen Bugue, who was disguised as a traveling merchant, checked into an inn, and before he could wash off the dust from his journey, the celestial fiend puppet controlled by Wuqi's divine will had come knocking on his door. "Brother Bugue! Brother Bugue! Open the door quickly!" Wuqi shouted as he knocked on Yen Bugue's door. The doors of the 2 guest rooms on the left and right of Wuqi were slightly opened. For elites of scouting office hiding in the room fixed their sharp eyes on Wuqi's face. At this moment, Wuqi had transformed into Lao Ai's appearance, replacing Lao Ai and holding the power of Euphoria Heavenly Palace. How could these elites of scouting office not know Lao Ai? When they saw his face, 4 of them drew their swords at the same time. As soon as he opened the door, Yen Bugue was shocked to see Lao Ai's face, and he was shocked. Fortunately, when he was having a secret discussion with Wuqi, he had heard from Wuqi that Lao Ai had submitted to him. Therefore, he understood the key of the matter. He took a deep breath, chuckled, and said in a low voice, "Prince of Chengxin's sudden appearance nearly scared me to death. How did you know I'm here?" Wuqi looked to his left and right, then smilingly cupped his fist towards the elite scouting officers standing behind the doors of 2 guest rooms. Abruptly, his face transformed back to Wuqi's original look. The 4 elite scouting officers breathed out a sigh of relief, then slowly sheathed their swords. In the face of Wuqi's instantaneous change of appearance, these elites of scouting office could only sigh with emotion. Duke of Tianyun's unfathomable means, he indeed had the ability to disguise himself as a ghost. After entering Yen Bugue's room, Wuqi returned to his original appearance. He lazily lay down on a large chair. "Sorry for the delay. I thought you would arrive earlier." Yen Bugue let out a long sigh, shook his head and said, "This matter is not up to us to decide. It was only after the punishment court gave us the strength of a nascent divinity cultivator that they released us." He fished out the bottle containing the bone and marrow strengthening pills, smiled and said, "I and the other 11 of you have each gotten 3 of these pills. With just 3 pills, we will have the overall strength to fight against a heaven immortal." Wuqi smacked his lips, took over the bottle, and carefully sniffed the aroma of the pills. The pills came with a pungent aroma, and Wuqi could recognize a few of the ingredients in them. But, What surprised Wu Qi the most was that the pill carried a refreshing aroma that was unique to dragon saliva. It was the dragon saliva from a heaven dragon with the overall strength of a heaven immortal. There was no way Wu Qi could mistake the aroma. No wonder it could have such a strong effect of replenishing one's physical strength and marrow. In just over a year, a group of mortals could have the overall strength to fight against a heaven immortal. Wu Qi shook his head and said with a sigh, no wonder the celestial court dares not to interfere too much in Pangu continent, even though the human warriors have a weak soul, and can only let those immortal sects infiltrate the continent carefully and spontaneously. However, the celestial court dares not to invade Pangu continent in an all-round way. There is a reason for that. Yen Bugue smacked his lips, put the bottle back into his sleeve, and shook his head with a wry smile on his face. If the Celestial Court really had a conflict with Pangu Continent's human emperor, how could the number of immortals be compared to the number of mortals on Pangu Continent? With an order from the human emperor, the overwhelming number of human warriors would completely overwhelm the immortals like an army of ants. Even though the mortal warriors had all kinds of flaws, they had an absolute advantage in terms of numbers, which was enough to make all the almighty experts shudder. In just over a year, a heaven immortal. Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh. Yen Bugue too shook his head and said, it's a pity that I've only obtained the foundational technique of the true body of heaven and earth scripture, otherwise. Wu Qi gave Yen Bugue a look and said in a deep voice, I have the complete set of the true body of heaven and earth scripture here. Send someone to bring it back to His Majesty as soon as possible. This technique must never be leaked out. With it, Great Yen can at least have an absolute strategic advantage over the other few dynasties. Furthermore, with this technique, Great Yen can even establish a foundation on Pangu continent. Right after he said that, Wu Qi shook his head again and said, forget it, Great Wei might have obtained a similar technique as well. Tell His Majesty that Duke of Longyang has hooked up with Dayu's King Zhangqiu, who is a king officially conferred by Dayu. It seems like he is obsessed with Duke of Longyang. Whatever I can get, Duke of Longyang can definitely get, and he will only get more and better than us. Yen Bugue cried out in horror, we must kill Duke of Longyang without delay. Wu Qi was taken aback. He hesitated for a while, then shook his head and said, Duke of Longyang is still my ally, which means he is also Great Yen's ally now. Killing him. Firstly, it's immoral, and secondly, even if I really want to kill him, I won't be able to do it. Killing someone in the territory of a primordial immortal. Wu Qi did not have the courage to do that. Furthermore, he still needed to obtain some information through Duke of Longyang, so how could he be willing to kill Duke of Longyang, the best source of information? Wu Qi and Yen Bugue chatted for a while. Wu Qi told Yen Bugue some things that were convenient to him, while Yen Bugue told Wu Qi everything he saw and heard in punishment court, regardless of whether it was important or trivial. After listening to Yen Bugue's description, Wu Qi's heart twitched. The power of punishment court in Zhong province was truly shocking. But, this was only the punishment court of a first-grade province in Zhong province, and yet, it was already so powerful. He wondered how many other first-grade provinces Great Yu had, and what kind of power did the punishment court in the capital city of Great Yu, which was in charge of all the punishment officers under the heaven. Wu Qi breathed out a long sigh, looked at Yen Bugue, smiled and said in an irresponsible manner, fortunately, it is not me who has to worry about these things, but His Majesty. Yen Bugue opened his mouth, but he was so angry by Wu Qi's irresponsible words that he couldn't say a word. He stared at Wu Qi for a long while, then finally said angrily, don't forget, the crown prince is your father-in-law. Wu Qi laughed and changed the topic, paying no attention to Yen Bugue's complaint. While he was talking to Yen Bugue, the door was once again knocked loudly by someone. Wu Qi rose to his feet and opened the door, then said smilingly, Old Master, you are finally here. As soon as the door was opened, Su Qin, dressed in rags and looking even more miserable than a beggar, walked into the room with a gloomy face. I, he said through clenched teeth. While he was about to curse out loud, Su Qin suddenly saw the mysterious look in Wu Qi and Yen Bugue's eyes. He quickly shut his mouth, smiled and said, I've traveled to many places over the past few months, and gained a lot of knowledge. The local conditions and customs of Pangu continent are very different from what I know in the past. Shaking his tattered sleeve, Su Qin smiled and said, the journey I've been through has been a lot of scenery, haha. Wu Qi and Yen Bugui just stared at Su Qin. Su Qin's face blushed, and at last, he could no longer flatter himself. Sullenly, he sat down on a large chair and said lazily, all right, I admit that my cultivation base is not strong enough, and I was tricked by someone. In the wilderness, a lonely teenage girl was crying for help. I wanted to save her, but in the end, I was attacked and robbed by a group of 12 heaven immortals. Clapping his hands, Su Qin laughed dryly and said, I threw away my storage ring and all my belongings, and only then did I manage to escape from their infighting. Pangu continent is such a damned place. I'll have to be extra careful in the future, and I'll never wander around randomly again. Su Qin was robbed. The cunning Prime Minister of Great Yen was robbed. Wu Qi and Yen Bugui exchanged a glance. Trying their best to hold back their laughter, they sat down next to Su Qin with a serious expression. Forcing himself not to look at Su Qin's tattered clothes, Wu Qi told them the current situation in Anhe City, as well as his goals. Firstly, Green City was going to open its gate in Greenwood Mountain, and Reverend Li Yang would be here in 2 years at most. Secondly, Wu Qi had to teach Reverend Li Yang a lesson, and it would be best if he could kill all the immortals who came here from Green City. Thirdly, he had to use this opportunity to let Yen Bugui earn a great credit when he tricked Reverend Li Yang and the other immortals of Green City. The credit of subduing Anhe City and bringing it back under the rule of Deyu should be enough for Yen Bugui to get a decent official position in punishment court. Fourthly, apart from letting Yen Bugui gain some benefits from this incident, Wu Qi also wanted Anhe City to be firmly under his control. No matter it was for Wu Qi or Great Yen Dynasty, it was very important for them to control a city on Pangu continent, and to control the territory of a province as their foundation. Anhe City had to be in the palm of Wu Qi's hand, and he had already chosen the future master of Anhe City, the descendant of the once legitimate city lord of Anhe City, the biological father of Beiji, Wu Qi's disciple, Zhu Lingong. Fifthly, he had to make things convenient for Wu Qi in this matter. Wu Qi did not conceal some of his plans in the dark abyss of Northern Ocean. He frankly told Su Qin that he was going to get something from the dark abyss of Northern Ocean. But there was an almighty expert overseeing the dark abyss. He had to create some troubles for that almighty expert, so that Wu Qi could enter the dark abyss smoothly. After listening to all the conditions and requirements Wu Qi mentioned, as well as the resources he had in his hands, Su Qin spent a full 2 hours calculating, murmuring phrases such as crossing the sea by deceiving the heavens, killing with a borrowed knife, driving the wolf to devour the tiger, and the fisherman reaping the benefits. 2 hours later, a sinister smile emerged on Su Qin's face. He lowered his voice and began to narrate his plan. The more Wu Qi and Yen Bugui listened, the brighter their eyes became, and they cheered at the same time. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.